else is getting better?
Oh, makes sense. He walks.
Who's up this year?
in Albuquerque.
Three of us.
Me and John David and
Who's the two-year?
I am.
Really?
I'm up. Plus is up.
All right, and good evening, and welcome to the January 5th, 2023 Budget Committee meeting. I'd like to call the meeting to order, and we'll start tonight with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, the Republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, well, Happy New Year, everyone, and thanks for everyone joining us here tonight at Town Hall or watching on LCTV or YouTube. Tonight is our kind of winding down our budget process. The majority of our agenda tonight is voting on town and school warrant articles, and then that will lead into our budget hearing next week on the 12th at CHS. Before we move into our agenda, we do have to allow remote participation. We have a member who is joining us virtually this evening, so I'll entertain a motion to allow remote participation tonight.
So made. Or second.
I have a motion by Ms. Douglas, second by
Barca.
Mr. Barca. Oh,
You can fight it
I'll let Mr. Taylor take that one. Okay.
A coin.
Although we'll do a roll call vote for everything tonight, so Ms. Hirschberger,
Yes.
Mr. Leary,
Yes.
Ms. Douglas.
Yes.
I am a yes. Ms. Stevens.
Yes.
Mr. Taylor.
Yes.
Mr. Barca.
Yes.
And Mr. Bork.
Yes.
And so that carries 8-0-0. And Mr. Hayes, if you want to state why you're remote tonight and if anyone's in the room with you, please, sir.
Yes, I'm remote because I have a cold virus and I didn't want to infect everybody, and there is nobody else with me.
Thank you, sir. Hope you get to feeling better.
Thank you.
All right. Next on our agenda is public input. So I'll open it up for any public input that we have this evening. How you doing?
Pretty good, thanks.
Good. Go ahead and state your name and residence.
My name is Timothy Kearns, 1 Brickyard Drive, Litchfield, New Hampshire.
Perfect.
I'm here tonight. I wanted to discuss with you, and I've sent you some emails. There's documents to be included in tonight's records. I appreciate that. Yep. I'll make this as quick as possible. I know you guys have a lot of stuff to do, but I wanted to make sure that you were aware as you were going through the night that these two warrants, petition warrants, can be expected on the floor. Even if all the signatures aren't necessarily there, they will show up on that day, and that will take a party of two, a motion and a second, and we're going to talk about it. So I wanted to read these into the record, and if you have any questions, I'll gladly answer them as best I can. But the first warrant is to see that any statements placed on the town of Litchfield warrants are the full truth, including any warrant that indicates no amount to be raised by taxation, authorizing the expenditure of unassigned fund balances without clearly stating that the unassigned fund balances can be used to reduce your tax bill by being applied as a revenue. The impact on the tax rate and the potential impact on your tax bill are different. Estimated tax rate impact of 000 in brackets is what we usually see. The New Hampshire State Secretary of State has referred to this practice as a political tactic. And these are available. Again, that's per diem. The concern with that is basically what happened this year. I believe the school department went quite a bit over their budget, and they found millions of dollars. Well, you know where they got that millions of dollars? They've been collecting it out of the general funds and putting it into all these accounts, and now all of a sudden it's all gone again, I assume. But that's just a comment on that. I think if we raise the money that we're going to spend and we don't have too much off the top, that's the whole idea. Tax me for what you're going to spend and don't be skimming off the top. That's just my opinion. But that's that warrant. The second one concerns me because the money for this is in the operating budget. I know there's a lot of confusion. Reference to Doug, he's our new full-time fire chief. I know there's a lot of wordplay going around interim. I understand that, sir. And I understand that's like the wordsmith in the nutshell game. And every year I've done this, I've been doing this, if I can talk, I've been doing this for a long time. I go to the floor and we play the nutshell game, which you guys have all, you spend good diligence on lining this stuff up. I get it. But now if I want to reduce $20 for whatever reason, we have to find the line and play this, and it gets dizzying. So I'm not going to go dizzying into any of it. But right now, we have a full-time chief, 2 people, and we don't have a part-time person. I don't know what the plan is. I'm sure there's contracts been done, and I know there's a discussion that there was something on the town site that said there was a contract, and that's been taken down, because apparently there isn't. I know it's closed session, and there's stuff that you can't talk about, but this is regardless of that. This warrant says to see that with New Hampshire RSA 154, that the town of Litchfield continue the established practice and maintain the job of Litchfield Fire Chief as a full-time employee as currently funded from the operating budget. Again, no amount to be raised from taxation if passed. Estimated tax rate is $00. And that's the two warrants. And I believe that to be correct because we're doing it right now. So we just haven't hired a part-time guy. My point is that it's done. Any questions?
Well, I will definitely be having questions for the Board of Selectmen, because my understanding is we've had a part-time chief and not a full-time chief. So if we've created a full-time chief out of thin air, you can guarantee I've got questions.
Well, and I've been following this for years.
That's what the question was.
I'm going back to 1984 when I got up and amended the article to create 2 full-time people. I'm the one who, go back and read it, I'm the one who made them EMTs.
Okay.
And there was a lot of grief back those days, and I stood up for it, and I did it, and I still feel that was the right decision today.
No.
But now we're looking at it, and you can see, if you go back to the record in, where is it, when the lawyer did, when I put in a petition warrant that got gutted,
Right.
that discussed the hours. This was the point. If we're gonna have a part-time, let's make it a part-time. The reason that wasn't done is there is no hours there. So yes, the Board of Selectmen does have the authority to flop back and forth between full-time and back-time and back and forth. They have that authority. I'm not questioning that, right? I'm saying that they found the money now. The person that's in the job, regardless of the word interim, which is basically a time-based thing, is the fire chief according to the statute. He has the authority according to the statute. We're doing it right now for the money that we have in the budget. Are we in danger? Because if we're not in danger right now and everything's okay, then why are we gonna have to change it? That's my question. If we're okay and I'm not in danger having 2 full-time people, one of them happened to be the fire chief, what's the deal? The old fire chief had 1,664 hours to use a year. If anybody retires in the near future, that person would only have 1,013. Right? They're 1,300 hours approximately. 300 hours less that's available to work. And when you go back, and I've looked, because I've done quite a bit of research, if you look at the last 5 years of what the previous chief was working, guess what? It's 1,300. He has a luxury of having the thing. So if our new chief is a retired person, newly retired, right, and they use all their time up in the first 9 months, well, he can't show up if he shows up to work, even to volunteer to drive the truck in a parade, he's going to lose half his pension. That's kind of setting somebody up, and I don't think that's right. And that's not.
No,
I won't continue. I know you guys got
I
stuff to do.
appreciate it. It just, like I said, it surprised me because in my understanding is our chief has been part-time. So to keeping a step now, because now we're getting rid of the part-time position and replacing it with a full-time without, based on the wording of this,
Well,
the assumption is that we have a full-time
Up
chief
until December,
and 2 full-time positions, which is not how it's currently.
up until December, the end of this year, we've had a continuous contracted chief. The current chief does not, as I understand it, you've even pointed out, isn't a contract. So he's an at-will employee, like every other town in mostly the area. This is the problem. The progression stops. You can no longer can anybody really retire as fire chief, right? Because if you're going to have to be retired to get into the job, how do you do that? And I don't want to pick on anybody. I greatly appreciate Doug, and I agree he's a beautiful job. And he has the potential to do a good job. But the selectmen have kind of set him up with this capped hour thing, and he's the one that's going to have to pay if he goes to a parade one day and it's too many hours. It's a confusing thing, and it's been set up a long time ago, and now we're in transition. But right now, there's no contract, and the person that's working the job, that's assigned to the job, is full-time, and the word interim doesn't enter into the RSA 154 in any place I've found, and I'd asked that, and nobody's given me a decent answer on that. And I'm beating the bushes for answers. Everybody knows, and then the help has been great, and I'm just beating the truth. I think when we go up and sit on the floor and discuss these things, and God save us that there's more than 14 people that show up this time. Last year was 28 people. 15 people was the majority. You guys are dealing with these numbers. That's scary to me.
So then I think another thing is, I think we would need to evaluate the comment that there's no tax impact then, because if we're making the chief a full-time.
So they're doing it
there
now.
would be a tax impact.
They're doing it now. There's a part-time person in the budget. The hours are there for 40 hours, right? I don't know what future negotiations have done for the thing. That's why I'm saying somewhere there's secrets are going on because somebody has already decided what's going on. Because when I ask, well, what's going to happen next week? Nobody's been able to give me an answer without jeopardizing the closed session stuff, non-public. And this is my point. Tonight, you guys are talking about the budget. The money for this that we're talking about, that they've decided already and talked about already, is in the budget. How can I sit here and have a discussion about these line items when we don't know what they're doing? And we know that it's a bottom line item, so we can play the game of taking stuff out and unfunding, I hate to say this, unfunding a particular department. It can't be done. Why? Because it's a general item. 15 people can't show up and decide to cut the police department. They can cut all of them as much money as they want out of the thing, but at the end of the day, the selectmen have the right to move it all around. Same thing with the school department. You get sucked into this arguing about, well, what am I going to do because you're not going to let me buy 5 pencils? No, it's not like that. You know, we've how much money have we assigned in unassigned fund balances in the last years? Hundreds of thousands of dollars. Hello, don't tell me that you're tight on money. You know, when you stack up your reserves and then accidentally go over by the amount you can cover in your reserves, they were perfectly legal to pull that over.
I think that's two different things. Like the town can carry a fund balance.
Right.
The school cannot.
Correct.
So, I mean, they did put money into reserve funds with intended purposes that were available for that.
And then their purpose, and then the intended purposes became another purpose. Anyways, I won't get into that. I don't want to go into the weeds. So.
My only thing is, I would caution you when you go to present a deliberative, is to make sure that we're not mixing and matching.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I covered a lot tonight. So.
Thank you, Mr.
Appreciate
Stearns.
your time.
Yes, thank you, sir. We've got your email. It's going to be in correspondence. Mr. Sullivan's going to enter those in the minutes as well. So thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. Any other public comment this evening?
What I will say in response to that is that the selectmen have not taken up what we are doing down the road as far as the fire chief goes. We have appointed Deputy Nickel as the interim fire chief, and that's as far as it's gone. There's no discussion on having a full-time fire chief, having a part-time fire chief, having anything. We've done nothing yet.
Because if this budget passes, you have 2 full-times and a part-time anyway, right?
We have a part-time position right
Right.
now, yes,
Right.
yes, which
Thank you, Mr. Lear. All right.
Michelle gave.
Review additions to tonight's agenda. I have one that I'm going to do, and I actually spoke with both the school and the town earlier today. We're going to flip-flop the order of what I had sent. We're going to have the town go first this evening. Fire department's here. So we're going to have the town go first for our warrant voting, and then the school is second. And I spoke to Mr. Totten. They were going to come a little bit later because they knew we'd be busy with the town to start. So that's the only change I have for tonight's agenda. Anything else? All right, correspondence. Bear with me, a little bit lengthy. We've had 3 weeks since our last meeting, and thanks to Ms. Stevens for pulling this together again. On December 15th, Chair Sun shared the Reimagining GMS site where information on the land referenced in the school district's warrant Article 2 was found. Also on December 15th, Ms. Hirschberger reshared the town default budget document. On December 18th, Mr. Sullivan shared the draft minutes for the December 15th meeting. On December 20th, Interim Fire Chief Nickel provided a memo detailing the history and current condition of the fire apparatus fleet. On December 21st, Town Administrator Kleiner, after speaking with Town Council, responded to a question that legally any budget or warrant from the Library Board of Trustees must be included in the municipal budget and warrants. Also on December 21st, Ms. Kleiner responded to Mr. Hayes' questions regarding Litchfield's guidelines for general assistance. She noted the application process is extremely thorough to establish need. Any amount granted is determined by an eligibility formula. Shelter costs are only included to prevent eviction, foreclosure, and to protect the health and safety of the household. The eviction foreclosure would need to be verified by the landlord or mortgage holder. On December 27th, Bookkeeper Snaman shared the December town budget report, November special fund balances, and budgeted revenues. On December 28th, Chair Sun shared the January 5th meeting agenda. Also on December 28th, Mr. Sun provided a list of the remaining committee meeting dates between January and March 2023. On December 29th, Ms. Kleiner shared the town warrant articles as voted by the Board of Selectmen. She included a response from town council that the committee legally cannot propose an initial budget that exceeds the tax cap. However, if the proposed budget is amended at deliberative to be higher, the committee may vote to support it. On January 3rd, Mr. Hayes shared an analysis on the town warrant 5 pertaining to the tax cap. His analysis showed how the budget could potentially increase over the next 10 years if the warrant were to pass. There were questions on the calculations, and I think Ms. Kleiner is going to speak to that later this evening. On January 4th, Ms. Hirschberger provided the school board's January 4th meeting agenda, business administrator reports, and draft warrant articles. On January 5th, Ms. Stevens forwarded the questions and responses to business administrator Doug Taunton on the school district default budget. Mr. Taunton created the default budget and then worked with Ms. Hirschberger and Ms. Stevens to finalize. On January 5th, Ms. Stevens shared responses to questions on the school district default budget from town council. On January 5th, Timothy Kearns of 1 Brickyard Drive wrote the committee, under RSA 32.5, please accept these documents and include them in the minutes under public input. The attached petition warrant articles are being submitted for consideration under public input. I request the budget committee to discuss the impact of these warrants, if any, on the current budget. Each of these petition warrants have, quote, no tax rate impact, end quote. One warrant pertains to funds contained to tonight's budget and may reduce the tax burden. Each of these warrants, regardless of deadlines for 25 signatures needed for budget expenditures, will be brought to the floor at town meeting. I understand RSA 154 is binding and the funds are in the budget. I wish to also speak to these warrants and answer questions from the board if they have any. And he spoke during public comment this evening to each of those. And then finally, on January 5th, Mr. Leary clarified the fire chief is not currently a full-time position. Doug Nickel has been named interim fire chief, and the Board of Selectmen has not discussed bringing the position from part-time to full-time, as Mr. Leary just stated as well. So that is our lengthy correspondence since our last meeting on the 15th. Next, we have review and acceptance of minutes. So I'll entertain a motion to accept our minutes from December 15th.
Make a motion to accept the minutes.
A motion by Mr. Bork. Do I have a second?
Yep.
A second by Mr. Leary. We'll roll call for all of our votes tonight. So Ms. Hirschberger,
Yes.
Mr. Leary,
Yes.
Ms. Douglas.
Yes.
I'm a yes. Ms. Stevens.
Yes.
Mr. Taylor.
Yes.
Mr. Barca.
Abstain.
Mr. Bork.
Yes.
And Mr. Hayes. All right, that carries 8-0-1. Okay, next is we're going to go into town business. And so we're going to go into, I'll invite our friends from the town to come up front if you all want to sit here. I know if you feel free to plug in if there's anything you want to share for our warrant articles. I did just reshare, my apologies for not sending this on Tuesday. It got lost in my email, but I sent a new list of the town articles that came after the special Board of Selectmen meeting on Monday. So there's a new email that I sent probably 20 minutes ago. The only change from last time had to do with the Article 7 on the fire engine. So make sure you use that article, that link. One thing.
Meeting was Tuesday.
Sorry, Tuesday. Yeah, thank you.
That's right.
One thing I do want to mention before we jump into voting on the town articles, I do think it's important to talk about where we are with the tax cap. We have this conversation, I feel like, at least every year since I've been a part of the board. Currently, we set $6,427 under the tax cap. We have, outside of the operating budget, we have 8 different town articles that we're going to review tonight. Of those 8, 4 of them have, three of them have tax impact. So I think it's important to note that where we currently stand in conversations that we've had in the past is as a budget committee, and per Ms. Kleiner's correspondence that we heard from town council, we cannot submit a budget that is over the tax cap. And so I think that's a discussion to have. And as we go through each of these warrant articles and choose to vote on them, any vote that we have on those puts us over the tax cap. We have to address that before the budget hearing, before these go to
So
deliberate.
if we vote to support one of these,
To recommend, yeah.
to recommend one of these,
You have to find
the
an offset.
only option is to go back to the budget and figure out where to
Correct.
cut.
So, yes, that's a true statement, yes. So, in the spirit of that, well, actually, we'll come back to that. So we're going to start with Article 4, which is the operating budget. So kind of the flow for tonight, I'm going to go through and read these. I know the Board of Selectmen has voted on these, so I'll read into the record their recommendations. I'll read all of these so that they're read in and people can hear them. And then I'll entertain any motions for us as a budget committee to recommend them as well. We can have a motion in a second, and then we can have any discussion that we need to have, okay? So we'll start with Article 4, which is the operating budget. Shall the town vote to raise and appropriate as an operating budget, not including appropriations by special warrant articles and other appropriations voted separately, the amount set forth in the budget posted with the warrant or as amended by the vote of the first session for the purposes set forth therein, totaling $7,713,003. Should this article be defeated, the default budget shall be $7,767,778, which is the same as last year with certain adjustments required by previous action of the town of Litchfield or by law, or the governing body may hold one special meeting in accordance with RSA 4013, 10, and 16 to take up the issue of a revised operating budget only. The estimated 2023 tax rate impact is 14 cents, and this article was recommended by the Board of Selectmen 5-0-0.
Make a motion to recommend the operating budget.
So I have a motion.
$713,003.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Yes.
A second. Any discussion?
I just have a question about the default budget and if we should be looking at that at this point.
Wasn't it sent out a while ago?
So
It was sent out, but I know on the school side, we were planning on coming and like just going over it with you guys, and you know, I thought the same process would be in place for the town.
Just to go through the default budget and how we arrived at that, is that?
Yeah, maybe explaining better some of the increases.
Are there particular ones? So
Yeah.
I mean, this has been out there. We've had an opportunity to look at it and have questions. So if you have specific questions, I mean, to put them on the spot for a presentation we didn't ask them for, I think is a bit.
Trying to find the link that I have on the default budget for the town. Give me just 1 second. That's
So
it.
here it is.
So the link to the 2023 default budget, there's a summary document that shows essentially an increase of $293,360, and there are line items associated with each of those, such as an increase for the town clerk, $84.94, accounting $4,000, tax collection $84.94, personnel administration, police, road maintenance, library, and debt services. So those are the areas that had increases associated with the default budget. All of those totaled to $293,360. Maybe without having to do a formal presentation, maybe just at a high level, what were those increases associated with for the default?
The town clerk was the warrant article for the part-timer. The highway was the warrant article for the full-timer. The police is contractual, which affects New Hampshire state retirement, taxes, anything, you know, pretty much in their contract.
Can I just ask the town clerk, that same dollar amount, is that split up
Yeah,
over two?
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
got it.
Tax collection and
Town
the town
clerk is a
Yep.
split, yes.
Okay.
50/50.
Right.
Police support is union contract as well.
Right.
She basically just added in the position that we took out, I'm guessing, right?
No, it was the warrant article that passed in
Oh,
2022.
Actually, they amended the law that says that if a position is removed from a proposed budget, it also has to be removed from the default budget. They finally codified that.
So accounting services, my question there, just because I did go to that municipal presentation or whatever by the municipal association,
So that was the
this is
audit.
an existing audit that the contract, when was it agreed to, and
Well, it was a warrant article to go out to somebody else to do the audits for the town, so I
That
took it
ties
as
back to that-
contractual.
all those articles that were in the paper when I moved to town about certain people being investigated for certain things.
So as it passed as a warrant article, it's contractual that you have to go out to have an audit done every
Well, I
year
thought
by
from
an
from the
outside.
webinar, and you know, maybe the dollar increase was in the warrant, but I thought that the contract amount, if it was agreed to,
Well, I don't think there was a contract amount when the original went out for the warrant article. It was just to have an audit done
Have an
every
audit.
year. Yeah, there was no, when they originally did it,
so
it
when was the
wasn't.
new audit?
We've had,
When
so
did the contract get signed?
this is our, 2022 is their last year for the contract.
So what I understood it to be was if your contract, say for example, was renewed after the new fiscal year starts, so if it renewed like July 30th, and it was at a higher rate than the past year, then you can't take that extra increase. Is that your understanding, or?
I took it as if if the voters didn't vote for the contract, you couldn't take the increase. They voted way back to have an audit done every year at no amount. You know, there was no amount to that warrant article, so I took it as whatever the cost is, the cost is. I mean, I could be wrong, but that's kind of what,
And
That's, to me, that's different than what was in the
well,
webinar.
and I know in conversations I've had with Mr. Taunton too, like there are things within the default budget that I know town legal and school legal don't agree on how they're calculating as well.
Right.
And I think some of that is a little bit open to interpretation.
So I mean,
like if you go back to
We're gonna-
waste management that we contract with, we don't carry that into next year's budget because the voters didn't vote for that amount or that contract. We have it in our budget. To me, the voters voted to have an audit done every year. So to me, it was the amount of audit. I mean, that's how I took it.
This webinar
as.
covered a lot of the contracts, and it really focused
So,
on that. So
so-
I feel
But
like
the
that's different.
contract-
It's not a lot of money, but I
Yeah.
just like, it was very, very insightful to listen to that. And I think it challenged some assumptions that, you know, that we had on our side, and I feel like that same open discussion should also happen with the town.
I guess it's not clear to me where the discrepancy is. That the audit for 2022, the Melanson contract is 27, plus an additional fee of 4,000.
The OPEB, it's,
So
the
they have-
OPEB is part of the audit, which is mandatory for New Hampshire state retirement, and our retirees that get, even though they pay for the insurance, they still have to do this mandatory OPEB, according to GASB.
So I guess, so which line item are you questioning? Like, let me narrow this down.
The accounting services, so it's
Right.
yeah,
The
the $4,000
Yeah.
increase. That's,
That-
I just was asking if that was part of the contract
Yes.
last year, or was it?
But the way I read it is that for an addition, that each made an additional fee for each program is $4,000. It's in their contract. That if you're doing this other service they're doing, it's
Oh, is it a new service?
It's not.
well, in addition, so they do their base contract of whatever they're doing, plus any additional program is $4,000. If they're doing their basic audit plus
The
the
OPEB, which is
that's an
legally,
additional, that's the
so
4,000.
legally you're obligated
To
to
do
do
that.
the OPEB. If you didn't, you
And so it
would have.
didn't happen last year?
Oh, it did. It happens,
Did.
yeah,
But it's just a cost increase.
yes.
Well, it's an increase that was agreed upon in the contract that the Board of Selectmen signed prior to this.
So,
So-
so they signed it prior to July 1st, 2022? Is that what I'm?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So that answers that.
Any other discussion on Article 4? Okay, I'll do a roll call. I'll do a roll call to recommend. Ms. Hirschberger,
Yes.
Mr. Leary,
Yes.
Ms. Douglas.
Yes.
I am a yes. Ms. Stevens,
Yes.
Mr. Taylor,
Yes.
Mr. Barka,
Yes.
Mr. Bork,
Yes.
and Mr. Hayes.
Oop, did
Oh.
we lose him?
We may have lost Mr. Hayes. Mr. Brunel, I'm not sure if we lost Mr. Hayes or not, but, okay.
Is he muted?
It may be because I connected.
Oh.
All right, he's not on the screen.
Okay.
Mr. Hayes, are you able to hear us, sir? You not be able to hear us. I'm gonna,
Is that it?
Technical difficulty.
let's try it one more time. Mr. Hayes, are you able to hear us, sir?
Yes, I can.
Okay, we're voting on, recommending the Article 4 operating budget. Your vote, sir.
I'm a yes.
Thank you. And that carries 9-0-0. All right, Article 5, amending the tax cap. Shall we adopt the provisions of RSA 32.5B and amend the tax cap whereby the Budget Committee shall not submit a recommended budget that increases the amount to be raised by local taxes based on the prior fiscal year's actual amount of local taxes raised by no more than 5% rather than the existing $175,000. The estimated 2023 tax rate impact is $0. This was recommended by the Board of Selectmen 5-0-0. There's a note that I'm going to read here quickly that's associated with this article, and it says a public hearing must be held by the Board of Selectmen on the question at least 15 days, but not more than 30 days before the question is to be voted on March 14th. Notice of the hearing shall be posted in at least 2 public places in the town and at least 2 public places in each town of multi-town districts, and published in a newspaper of general circulation at least 7 days prior to the date of the hearing. Do I have a motion to recommend?
So made.
Motion by Mr. Barka. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Leary. Discussion.
Question on the 5%. And I tried to follow along in the selectmen meeting, and it went on way, way longer than I wanted
was your
to
longest
stomach,
one
and I
ever.
figured
That's
I'd
like a
just
normal school
go
board
the easy
meeting.
way and ask the question. The 5%, is that based on the bottom budget of, let's say, 7 point something million? Is it based on the revenue? What number is the 5% tied to?
Okay.
Because
So
I
we-
probably heard 5 different versions during the meeting.
Yes.
So we thought this would be, and I'm gonna ask John because I've never hooked up to this. So sharing this, on the screen, I'm not quite sure.
Oh, you're looking to share via WebEx? Yeah.
You can share it that way, and,
Share here?
yeah, just when he needs to talk, you need to let him unplug his computer.
Okay.
So, go right here, sorry.
And while he's while Mr. Burnell is assisting, I know Mr. Hayes had shared an analysis that he had put together, which I think had some questions, kind of based on some assumptions that I think Mr. Hayes made, which I think prompted Ms. Kleiner to put together what she has for tonight. Because to your point, Mr. Taylor, I think there were some different things that were heard at that Board of Selectmen meeting of how that 5% was calculated. I think Mr. Hayes heard it one way, I heard it one way. Lots of other people in the room heard it different ways, and so Ms. Kleiner is going to provide some clarification around that.
I heard it a couple different ways, and I was in the room.
All right, we'll turn it over to you. We'll turn it over to you, Ms. Kleiner.
Okay, so, just some background. When you're talking about the tax cap, the estimated amount of local taxes to be raised. So if you look in the 2023 budget, there's a tab that says tax cap. And if you go to that, you'll see that we take off the taxes that were raised and appropriated from last year, and we start a new line each year, taking that figure. That's when they say the estimated amount of local taxes to be raised shall not exceed the local taxes raised by the prior year by more than the tax cap. And for an SB2 town, which is different than a city or a corporation, it has to be a fixed dollar amount or a fixed percentage. So if you're on that screen, and I'll go to it here,
Yep.
It should look like this.
Yep.
Okay, so the amount that was raised last year in 2022 was this 4,821,000. And so we carry that forward. That's actually what the tax rate setting process is determined on. And we add $175,000 to that. That's your tax cap. Which really has nothing to do with the gross appropriations at that point. And I think where a lot of people were confused was they were taking the gross appropriations and adding $175,000.
Right.
It gets a little complicated because you have to take your gross appropriations less your revenues, add your veterans tax credits, add your overlay to get the current tax year. And that's where you see the 4,989,796. So in a year like we are now, where the cost of inflation is very high, what we generally see in municipal finance is trouble with your revenues, right? So often you start to see revenues start to decline. Revenues are very important because they're offsetting that 7,713,000 that eventually get you down to what needs to be raised and appropriated by taxes. So it would be changing the 175 that you're adding to last year's taxes to a no more than 5%.
If my calculations are correct, based on everything you just explained, if we were in that model this year, the amount that we would not be able to exceed as a budget committee would be $249,489.80. Is that a true statement? Hey, look at that.
Oh, look at that.
Right. So, which would be $75K more than where we're currently set.
Roughly, yes.
Roughly, yes.
Yes. So now there's, some nuances to this because you have to figure out your warrant articles, right? And we don't know what revenues are. So looking at the analysis that had been done, it's very hard to do that for a projected period of time. I can't tell you what our revenues are going to be 5 years from now.
Right.
So basically, I did this more as an illustration of what happens using the $175,000 tax cap. Putting in a 3% budget increase, which 3% is extremely low, especially when you're facing an inflation of 8.3%, which is what they estimate for this year. You're always going to be over the cap. And those are some pretty ugly numbers to the far right.
And that's assuming revenues stayed constant, right?
Yep. I kept everything else constant. And I didn't, year after year, take it down to the budget cap, which only impacts the problem more. So
I'm sorry, can I just ask a question? So why would we keep revenues level, but yet we are going to highlight the fact that our cost and spending is going to go up based on inflation? Most of our revenues come from the room and meals tax, correct? And if inflation is hitting high in terms of our costs, my family restaurant bill is going to go up considerably because the cost of food is going up at the restaurant. So therefore, the tax of whatever it is, 8-9%, is going to go up and there's going to be more revenue. So why wouldn't we increase revenues year over year based on inflation as well?
because often that's not what we see. So we just did an economic impact with NHMA. Generally, what you see as inflation increases is a decrease in families spending that extra money on those meals and rooms. You also tend to see less new cars purchased, so you have a decrease in your motor vehicle registrations. We'd like to think that people will continue to spend that money that they have set aside in their budgets, but it's not normally what we've seen in high inflation like what we're currently in. So in fact, when NHMA met, and I think it was a couple weeks before our default budget, we talked about this, and they're really asking cities and towns to look at what your revenues generally are, how you're able to stream back, because they're expecting it to get worse instead of better for the immediate future. So at the 175, you're going to constantly be in a year like you were this year, right? So I think there were some really difficult decisions that were made. And although we are trying to keep the expense to the residents as low as we can, some of those cuts are going to impact services. If you start to cut that amount, you're going to start to impact services. There's no way.
So, I hear what you're saying, but I don't know if the numbers support that. So, when I'm looking at the tax impact, and maybe something got overwritten in mine, when I look at 2018, which I seem to, no, it was 2008 that was a bad year, wasn't it? Okay, because 2018 shows that based on what I have here, a very low percentage of local revenues being provided. Like 2018 we had, so that's 10 million, I couldn't figure out why.
That was an aberration.
I can't figure out why either, because it throws off everything on my numbers.
Was that the fire station?
It is the fire station.
Yeah.
Because
it is.
You take
to
it in.
Mr. Taylor's point, consistently, we are, local appropriations are run about 57 to 62% of our budget. So as our costs go up, I would have carried forward on a conservative number that we're responsible for 62%, because that means we're raising more. So I would think that revenue should be adjusted even slightly, just because as our revenues go up, people are paying more. They might be buying fewer of them. Like when I go to the grocery store, I have fewer bags, but it costs more. So I'm still paying the same amount. It costs more. So there will be an increase in revenue simply because everything costs more.
But look at 2022 to 2023. Not necessarily so.
I think
so. We've already started to see the decline. And another thing that's out there that is the veterans credit, right? So 4%. That's a warrant article. We don't know the impact of that. We've been quite clear. We don't know if there will even be an impact.
Right, so
for that.
2023.
But that would affect.
But that's still within range. So 2023, based on what we have here, it's 65% is raised locally. 2022, 63% raised locally. The year 2021, 61%. So it's still in the mid to low 60% range. So by keeping the number you have, it artificially increases that number to 70%, 75%, 80%, because you're keeping the same revenues even though our costs are going up. It's
Right.
artificially keeping the current tax year estimate higher than it should be, because our revenues should also be going up slightly. I'm not going to say it should be 65.2 versus 63.1. I'm just saying in the mid to low 60s should be about what we should be estimating that the town would be responsible of.
They're proportionally.
Right.
Even if we raise that proportionally,
So mine shows.
amount of the tax
Yeah.
cap.
Even if you raise it, the
It's
175
not-
isn't sustainable.
Oh, I'm not saying, I'm not arguing.
But hold on, though,
arguing
that's
that
the problem.
175 is, I'm not saying 175 is
Yeah.
sustainable. I'm just saying that.
Is
if we're-
5% the
to
right
make-
number? I don't know. but
No, that,
yeah.
yes, so there's that too, but I'm just saying, if we're gonna put this chart out there, I wanna make sure that the numbers we're doing before we scare everybody is actually, they're good numbers. Like, 'cause data, I hate to say, not good in, not good out. It's like and how statistics can be manipulated. I just wanna make sure that our numbers are justifiable, we can explain them, because the question's gonna come up, why are revenues remaining the same for the 10 years being projected there? Reality is, they're not. They're going to adjust because it runs consistently in the 60 to 65, or if we're doing revenues, it's going to be
62.5.
30 to 35%. It's not going to be, because right there, now you're saying it's 30% versus 35% by the time you get to the end.
But, I
And
mean,
so-
if the state is telling us that, then if that is an absolute that we're hearing from them and from the town, I'm sorry, but I can't support sticking it to the taxpayer, where then at that point it's gonna go to $10,676,000. And
So I
that's
That's
basically
the budget.
putting all the burden of acceleration onto it, and I understand that it's going to cut services. Unfortunately, you know what? That's gonna be what's going to have to happen, because forcing 10 million in 2034 on the taxpayers with no additional revenue, in my mind, is immoral. At that point, you have to just say, you know what, we have to cut back. Any household that is going to deal with inflation, no raises as far as income is concerned, has only one option to do, and that is cut back. And I realize that, you know, Mr. Burke has said before, well, you know what, that it's different in municipal. But you know what? Money is money, and when money runs out, there isn't more to be had. We're not the federal government. We can't print more money. Therefore, as much as I agree that 175 isn't sustainable, but in this scenario, I can't put that burden on the taxpayer.
is there a number that you would be comfortable? Like, have you considered what number the number should be? Because the 175 is from a discussion by selectmen who are no longer here that they arrived at. So what number should we be discussing now? I
mean, this year
may
was
not agree 5%, maybe 4%, maybe.
was 3.6 the number this year? Is if
So I looked back to 2010 based on your spreadsheets and looked at the gross appropriations column. And in my simplistic way of looking at it, so that's 14 years, 2 of them are aberrations, right? The fire truck and then the year after, because it actually percent-wise went down. So I stripped out those 2 years and I said, what was the percent increase on average for those 12 years? And it came out to 3.83%. So that includes all of the warrants. So that's not just your, you know, tax cap, but it's the warrants as well. So for me, the fact that warrants included, the bottom line is this town is paying on average 4% increase every year. That's what we're already paying. And that includes the warrants. So for me, I believe it should be a percentage. I feel 5% is too high. I feel like it should be more between 3 and 4% because there's going to be warrants that are added to it. So I think that provides a sliding scale as it goes up. But the other thing I think to consider is that, for example, looking at the 5% increase, it's not, I mean, we as a budget committee are not going to present a budget that's 5% every year. Even with that scenario, it's 3% max every year. That's not going to happen. So, for example, looking at the 12 years, only 4 out of those 12 years were over 5%. So that was a third of the time. You know, it's going to be different every year. So I understand the model, but this was how I looked at it and my rationale with what I came up with.
your numbers are similar to where mine were too, in that 3.5 to 4%. I think, you know, one of the things that stood out to me, well, 2 things that stood out when I thought about this article. One, I think it's really important. We keep saying 5%, 5%, 5%. I don't think we should make an assumption that the budget's going to increase every year by 5%, because the way it's written, it says by no more than 5%. Right. Because I think both the Board of Selectmen and the Budget Committee have the ability to keep that below 5% if we so choose, right? Based on everything that we've just talked about.
But it's not the budget.
What was that?
So it's not the budget. It's not that the budget increases 5%. So,
Right.
and I think that's where a lot of people get lost, because 5% of the $10 million is a lot bigger than 5% of the taxes.
Right.
You have to reduce, already reduce out the revenues that we are receiving. So it would be no more than 5% on the amount of tax that
Right.
has to be raised.
Thank you. Yes.
That's a good
And my point in that is, I agree. I think a percentage provides both this group and the Board of Selectmen more flexibility in a year like this than a hard dollar amount. I think we could go back and forth. Is it 4? Is it 4.5? Is it 5? But for me, the way it's written, by no more than 5%, gives us the ability to say that it could be less.
The only concern
Yeah, that's what I was
We
gonna
look
say.
at 175 as the number we want to achieve, and as soon as we achieve
You're
it,
right.
we say, okay, we're there. So I think that the same thing would happen with a percentage.
well, from a different perspective, if we don't present a number that people can buy into, you're gonna be stuck with 175. So, because it'll fail. Like, so, if we agree that 175 is no longer an appropriate, it's more of a blunt instrument than a fine scalpel. What would be a number that seems appropriate? Because like, I think I did, was it 4% is almost where we are right now based on using the.
That's what it wants.
If I considered last year's number and added 4%, I think yes, I have a little under. It's a little under 200 grand, and then it grows or whatever. Maybe it was 3%. I think 5 is high. I'm higher than I'm comfortable with. What is the appropriate number? I'm not sure. 5 makes me nervous. 175 makes me nervous because if we're honest and completely honest with ourselves, there are investments in infrastructure this town has to make. It sucks and it's gonna hurt, but it's gonna have to be done. So how do we address that? How do we provide ourselves with the tools to make those investments in a way that we're able to do it proactively instead of reactively and having to pay even more, because it always costs more when you're doing it under the gun than if you can plan for it appropriately.
The problem is 4% would have only given us another $17,000 this year.
Right.
It's 192.
Yeah.
Whereas 5% gives us 241 or 249.
249.
I guess the question is like,
To John's point, doesn't mean we have to go to the 250. I'm sure we wouldn't have. I'm sure we probably would have ended up pretty close to where we are today, but maybe could have recommended a few more.
on the other hand, from my perspective, I don't mind a lower number because it forces a good discussion. I don't want everybody to be like the concerns are close enough. We have room. We're good.
We're at 4.99%.
Yeah, so we don't have it, but what if it should have been 4.86? Or what if it should have been 4.75? Like, are we gonna say, oh, we're within range, good job, or could we have done better? So I don't mind the tighter number because it forces that discussion, but what should that number be? Like, if we don't go into this with a number that we can back up and support, it'll get voted down and you're stuck with 175. So what is a number that actually meets the needs of the town?
My other concern is, and I know the selectmen had discussion, as far as looking at it every year and maybe changing it. I don't see that happening. But what happens if all of a sudden the economy turns next year and it's totally different than it is this year? And then we give them 5%. Are they gonna look at it and say, you know what, we don't need 5%?
Well, that's our job, right? Well, it should be our job. We should be looking at, sure, 5% looks great, but you really only needed 3% this year. So we're not, we're 3% less than 5. We did good.
I agree with you.
The selectmen this year punted the whole thing to us. So I don't think they would do that. I don't think that they would get under those numbers.
And that was gonna be my point, Tara. This year in particular scares me as far as trying to go this particular route, because we were the ones that had to be vilified for the fact that we had to get it down from well over 175 to under 175. And now all of a sudden you start taking a look at a percentage. I mean, who's to say that, that it doesn't come in 400,000 over the tax cap in future years? It's just, this year was disappointing of getting something that wasn't even in the ballpark of getting close to the tax cap. And, no different than like with the school when we, got rattled about the special ed funding getting used for other purposes. That's a tough one for me to swallow and trust that moving to this type of scale, that it is not going to be peril and doom for the taxpayer.
So in my perspective, it's just take the Board of Selectmen out of it. Like, this is what would make our job, what do we feel we could, budget that we could support is appropriate for the town? Like, we could say the Board of Selectmen did a great job or didn't do a great job, but at the end of the day, it's our job. So what tools do we need to make sure that we can present a budget that's appropriate for the taxpayers? Because the tax cap, quite frankly, constrains the budget committee. It doesn't constrain the school board. It doesn't constrain the Board of Selectmen. It's the budget committee. So what tools do we need in our toolbox to get our job done?
We don't have the critical tool of the fact that we can negotiate contracts.
Well,
So
and
therefore, then all of a sudden, the school or the town turns around and goes, well, you know what? 80% of the budget is contractual. There's nothing you can do to touch it. Then what are we supposed to do?
So I think in the town side, it does have an impact. Right? When they go into negotiations, they're like, look, I can only give you so much. The school doesn't have that constraint, so they can do. The town, I actually think it does get factored into the discussion. So in that respect, and reality is, the voters can vote down a budget, a contract, and we can find ourselves back at the negotiating table. So ultimately, that's up to the taxpayers. But at the end of the day, what tools do we need? Regardless of who can negotiate contracts, it still goes to the taxpayer. It still provides leverage. Hey, I'd love to give you everything you guys want and need, but I am constrained by a 3.54% tax cap. We gotta make it work. So there's still a tool there. But at the end of the day, it's like, what do we need? I think 175 handcuffs us too much. I hate to say it, because I'm cheap. But I think that we need to be realistic. We have aging infrastructure. We have things that need to be addressed. What do we need? And whether that's 3%, 3.5%, 4%, 4.5%, I don't think it's 5%. But we need to find a number that we could, and I don't think we can amend it here, so we didn't have to.
We can't do anything. So
Our job tonight is to either recommend or not recommend. I think.
Do we have to recommend
But
that?
I'm curious as to why the 5. So, taking into consideration this example, which is just looking at, fiscal 23's current tax and doing the math out. The 175 is already 3.39%.
3.4, yeah. Call it 3.4.
So, that's too low. The next is the 249, which is only $75,000 more, which is a 5%.
Yep.
And that's too high.
I
But
said
what you're
99.
going to get in contract increases in 2023 is going to be a lot, outside vendors and cost of services is going to be higher than 5%. So the town's already going to have to go and make some serious negotiations when we're doing our purchases. And doesn't matter what you're talking, anything from supplies to and we're gonna do that. So we're set, not only does the town have a purchasing policy, but everything is scrutinized by the board when it's brought in front of them. I think I disagree that no more than 5% is too much. I think somewhere within that, which is giving the budget committee the power to choose that, and you could base it on how the economy is flowing, right? So right now, it's horrendous. It just is, and we know that. How do we get from 4.7 to 8.3? But maybe next year we start to see things fall, hopefully. And now the budget committee feels, okay, 5% is too much. We're really looking to come in at 4%, and you have that authority.
So I have a question. There was a lot of discussion about how SB2 towns, it's disappointing that we can't tie it to that economic factor. Is there any reason why, say the warrant article says 5%, can the Board of Selectmen have a policy where their own budget is actually tied to that factor instead?
So the only way that the tax cap can be changed in SB2 town is to actually go to the voters. If the board wanted to have an internal policy with its department heads, I mean, I can't see that that could be forbidden or illegal. They run the town. I mean, they could certainly say to their department heads at any time, we are not accepting a budget increase over 4%.
Because at least historically, I agree with Brian that the discussion has never really been how much is the next year's budget over last year's budget. It's always been how much is it over the tax cap. Like that's like the starting point. So that's where I'm hesitant for the 5%, is because I don't want that to be the starting point. If the Board of Selectmen can say, have that 5% as the needed wiggle room, and then whether it's Budget Committee or Board of Selectmen or something can put into place some sort of policy where it is tied to that. What was that called? The economic factor that you were talking about?
Oh, the CPIU.
CPI.
So, yeah, this is how cities and that are corporations, right? They base their spending cap, if it's Nashua, tax cap if it's Manchester, on the CPIU. It's generally based on the prior year's CPIU. There are, like Portsmouth, Rochester, they work it the same way, but they take into consideration assessments and change in assessments because that affects your tax rate, right? So there are different formulas out there, just none of them apply for an SB2 town.
Okay. Yeah, I was just curious if maybe that's some sort of, I don't know, in between, because I understand that 5% was not enough for this year.
So I'll kind of give my 2 cents on where I am with this. I think this has been a really good discussion. I feel like, somebody said it earlier, I do feel like it is our job when it comes to, if we feel, let's say this were to pass and we're given a budget that's at that 5%, then it does become this group's job to get it down to align with the economy, to align with the needs of the town and the residents. My fear is that if we choose not to recommend this, it stands a chance of not passing, and we're going to be sitting here at $175,000 next year with a lot of these same discussions and issues. Is it, if it goes up to 5% and we're looking at an extra $75K next year with numbers projected to go where they are, we're still going to have to make a lot of really tough cuts as this group. Whoever's sitting here next year is going to have to make a lot of really tough cuts, because this year we cut $250,000 and it's not going to look much different next year, unfortunately. So I'm comfortable with this presented as it is, because it says by no more than 5%, and it doesn't mean that the Board of Selectmen is automatically going to present the Budget Committee with a budget that is 5% over that tax base. It means that they can go that high if they need to, based on certain economic factors, and then it becomes the Budget Committee's job to get it down to a more manageable number if we need to.
I can assure you that if this passes, the budget will come into us next year over 5%.
Wait, no, this committee will get much lower than that.
What percentage did it come in over this year?
I'd have to do the math, but more than 5 probably.
I think 5% is going to scare the taxpayer, and
It's a scary number until you break down where it's actually coming from.
And what it compared to what it's been,
yeah.
and what little difference it is between 175 and 5% is
not
like
much, yeah.
it's minimal.
Right. I think when you just look at those two numbers, you're right. It paints this is a scary number. I think when you look at we're at 3.5% to 4% historically, you're talking about $75,000 that becomes an option to be added in the budget. It's not as big of a number as it looks like written here in this article.
3 to 4% historically. However, those include warrants. So this doesn't mean that warrants will still not happen at the same pace as they are happening currently.
It's true.
I think we have to be careful there, though, because the warrants that aren't included are the big ones. Like,
In the sake of time, any additional new discussion on this?
just curious what happens if we don't recommend it.
So,
Would the Board of Selectmen go and look at changing the percentage, or?
here's the timeline.
They could certainly do that up until,
Yeah, that's what I was asking. Is
Or
there
if it's
time?
deliberative, really, right? Yeah.
I think even budget.
it could be, I don't know, their
I
next
don't see
meeting,
it
you have,
happening.
you have 2 more weeks. Your meeting's not for 2 weeks anyway. It's after the next budget hearing.
Yep.
Last day for budget committee to deliver warrant recommendations is Thursday, January 26th. So it could be amended at the, or.
No, that deliberative's after.
No, but the budget hearing, we could have some of them come back and say, you know what, we think a different number would be, it wouldn't be the first time we've gone into a hearing without recommendations on something.
It could be amended at the hearing, or it could be amended at the Board of Selectmen meeting if they so
Or at
choose.
deliberative, yep.
Any additional new discussion for tonight?
5 makes me nervous. I think 5 will land you with 175 again. So I think we have, I appreciate the town's concern, and you're doing a great job advocating on behalf of the town. I think we have to feel, what number do we feel is comfortable advocating to our neighbors for? What number do we think is appropriate?
Right now, we have a motion and a second on 5%.
That is true. So you can vote yes or no, I guess.
Correct.
So the-
Any
That
additional
sounds like
discussion?
call to vote to me.
All right, roll call. So the motion is to recommend Article 5, amending the tax cap, and changing that number by no more than 5% rather than the existing $175,000. Ms. Harshberger,
No.
Mr. Leary,
Yes.
Ms. Douglas.
Only because I don't like the number, no. I like the idea, but not the number.
I'm a yes. Ms. Stevens,
I'm gonna say yes, and then I'd push for a policy later.
Mr. Taylor,
No.
Mr. Barca,
Yes.
Mr. Bork,
Yes.
and Mr. Hayes.
No.
It is recommended by the Budget Committee by a vote of 5-4-0. All right, Article 6. So before we get into Article 6, and I know this is going to throw all things out of whack here, I am going to make a motion. Give me just 1 second. To reduce, and if you give me an opportunity to go through the motion and second for discussion, I'll give my rationale behind it. To reduce in the town budget, 4194.10 general government building, line 635 gasoline. I'd like to reduce that line item by $14,174.
I'll second.
This motion by Mr. Sun, second by Mr. Taylor.
Can I ask what
Discussion.
per gallon you went by? Because that was on my list.
I did not go by per gallon.
He's finding numbers.
I am finding numbers, and I looked at places that I saw where cost savings could potentially exist. So I didn't.
So this is simply to provide room in the tax cap to vote in favor of a warrant article.
I will give my rationale behind this. So when I looked at the 3 warrant articles that we had that had a tax impact, there was this one, there's the fire weekend hours, and there's the library hours. This was the one when I looked at it that I think has an absolute positive impact on this town to our people that need it the most. And I really struggled, me personally, being able to not vote for it, and I struggled with this committee not being able to recommend it and vote for it. And what I hope is that if this passes and this amount gets reduced, and that if we vote to support this warrant article, that if town people so choose, at deliberative, they come to the floor, and if they want to add this $14,000 back in for the gasoline, they can so choose to do that. But that's why I made my motion to support warrant article number 6. That's my rationale. Any additional discussion on the motion for the town budget reduction?
I think this is probably the most important warrant article. You know how I've always advocated for those that are less fortunate in town. So I agree with you, Mr. Chairman.
And that was also something identified looking through budgets again today and looking at, again, none of us have a crystal ball. We don't know where we're gonna be
Right.
in 12 months from now, but they budget for $3.50 a gallon, where right now you can get gas for
Right.
about $2.80 a gallon.
That-
That's with taxes, and they get it without taxes.
I felt like that was the town budget is lean as it is. We've cut a lot. We've cut a lot in a lot of places in fire and police. That was one place I didn't want to touch, and I felt like this was as safe of a place as there was.
What you're saying, but I wonder if, like, is this an opportunity for us to really say and get out there and say, even though we didn't vote against it, no, I think there's a lot of people in town who would still vote yes anyway, especially if we really talk about the fact that this is something that we do support. So maybe we don't have to cut the gas.
I hear you,
And
and
it's worked so
No.
well on the fire
and I
truck.
don't disagree with it, but I think the fire truck.
I know,
we-
but this
we
is a
made
different
that-
thing.
we
This
made
is
that
about
case in point
humanity and helping
loud and
people.
clear last year of why this group felt we supported it. We couldn't legally vote for it, and that's where we are right now. If this motion
Oh, this
doesn't,
happened last year too? We couldn't vote for it?
the fire,
For the fire truck.
Oh, right, that I
Could
knew.
have
Yeah,
voted
yeah.
for that, or I could.
we could have,
Here,
sure,
legally, you could have voted.
and then we'd have
for
to find the
fire.
money.
Correct.
Yes,
That's a lot of money.
Yes.
it's
I
not
just want to
14,000.
clarify that
Yeah.
it wasn't illegal to vote.
We could have held the
Yeah.
vote. We then would have had to find the money in the town budget
But
before
we
we delivered
thought
it.
that was an easy
I say,
sell.
right.
We'd still be here. Any additional discussion on the motion for the reduction of $14,174?
I just think it's a very reasonable line. You know, when we first started voting on the town, you couldn't get gas for less than $3.50. Now you can get it up to $3. I
Oh,
think
that's
it's,
true. Okay.
it's very responsible.
Well, for that perspective, yes, but and then if you consider that technically the budget season, their budget year's already started technically, right? And we're down a
Yes.
few spots that are already budgeted in the budget. So from a purely taxpayer perspective, absolutely, I think it's a good spot. Do I think I'm gonna horse trade it for another one? Probably not.
I'd just like to know, Brian, where do you get gas for $2.80?
The Irving and Hudson, right? is
Really?
$2.77.
No kidding.
And if you have the Irving card, it's $2.77. And again, we're paying taxes and the town doesn't pay taxes.
Dude, pay with your Sam's card, you double that by getting 5% back, so
Yeah.
just
All right.
stack them all
But
up.
I'll go there tomorrow.
Yep.
Thank you.
I'll roll call vote. Again, motion reduce $14,174 out of general government buildings, gasoline, $6.35. Ms. Hirschberger,
Yes.
Mr. Leary,
Yes.
Ms. Douglas.
Yes.
I'm a yes. Ms. Stevens,
Yes.
Mr. Taylor,
Yes.
Mr. Barca,
Yes.
Mr. Bork,
Yes.
and Mr. Hayes.
Yes.
Motion carries 9-0-0.
And seeing you're looking for a few dollars for that warrant article, can I, and John can give me clarification. They're gonna utilize ARPA funds to purchase MDTs for the police cars? And my understanding is he's purchasing them all to outfit them all, correct? But there are two in this year's budget. Is that on top of the two that are in the budget, John?
We took them out.
That
Yeah, they're
is
out,
already
yeah,
out.
they're out, yeah. The
The board,
Yes.
the board did, yeah.
So that's why you put them back in.
Yeah,
Right,
the
thank you.
the tasers aren't in there either. They
Right,
shouldn't be in
I
there.
know the tasers
No,
were.
they aren't.
Yeah, they should
The
all
other
be
ones-
out.
They should be zeroed out, they're just probably still referenced.
Okay,
Thank you. Sorry for the digression there, but we'll now move back to Article 6, Human Services and Health Agencies. There's additional information that you can click on and see a list of all of the agencies on this. And then the article reads, sorry, I lost my spot. Article reads, shall the town vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $20,600 to support human services and health agencies providing services to the town of Litchfield? Estimated 2023 tax rate impact is 2 cents, and this was recommended by the Board of Selectmen 5-0-0. We have a motion to recommend.
Sure.
Motion to recommend.
I'll second.
Motion by Mr. Bork, second by Ms. Douglas. Discussion?
If it
Okay.
interests anyone, I will say that it was, all these requests were reviewed by myself, the health officer, and a citizen's representative. This is kind of what I did a lot of in my past life. So I looked for the impact to Litchfield in a lot of these requests, and we had a good hour and a half discussion on what the requests, what type of information and how solid it was. So I feel really good in these numbers and that it's impacting Litchfield.
Thank you.
Well, I appreciate the time that you guys take for this. I much prefer this method to the whole, well, let's put a number out there and see if the voters take it. I really appreciate that there's a
agreed.
thoughtful consideration for which organization gets what amount. So thank you for, and the rest of your cohorts who do that. Thank you.
I can't remember. This spreadsheet voters see it when they vote, right? Do they see where this goes, or do they see that in the voter's guide?
In the voters' guide.
Voter's guide, okay. Any additional discussion?
So you're saying that because of this, and there's not room for this?
There is room for
All
this,
right.
yeah. By $1.
I might be willing to do the horse trade, because I see the benefit to this, especially in today's day and age with all the help that families and individuals need. I think that this is
I totally agree.
a great resource.
Couldn't agree more, and this money goes to several different organizations that help people all throughout our community. All right, we'll roll call vote. Ms. Hirschberger.
Yes.
Mr. Leary.
Yes.
Ms. Douglas.
Yes.
I'm a yes. Ms. Stevens.
Yes.
Mr. Taylor.
Yes.
Mr. Barca.
Yes.
Mr. Bork.
Yes.
And Mr. Hayes.
Yes.
All right, that is recommended by the Budget Committee by a vote of 9-0-0. Next is Article 7. We'll invite our friends from the Fire Department if they want to join us as well. I'll read the article, and again, this is a new one from the last time we reviewed these. If you didn't have an opportunity to watch the special meeting that the Board of Selectmen held on Tuesday, a lot of great information was shared there. The article currently reads, Article 7, Fire Engine Purchase. Shall the town vote to approve spending the sum of $656,899 for the purpose of purchasing a fire engine with equipment and attachments to the fire department, and to utilize funds received from the American Rescue Plan Act, ARPA, for this purpose? Estimated 2023 tax rate impact is $0. The note associated with this article is replacement of the 1995 fire engine is consistent with the capital improvement plan presented in December 2022. This truck is a 2023 truck and will be delivered in March-April of 2023 at the 2021 pricing. This was recommended by the Board of Selectmen 4-0-0.
Make a recommendation to approve Article 7.
A motion by Mr. Bork. Do I have a
Second.
second? Second by Ms. Hirschberger. Discussion. I'll let you all share anything you want to share, highlights on the article.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for the hard work that went into this one.
Absolutely.
So basically, we were working with the town administrator to come up with the final numbers for the article to purchase the truck that would have taken us 2 years to get. I've asked the sales guy over the last couple of years, every now and again, hey, you got any demo trucks? Because every now and again, they'll build a demo truck. And for the last few years, because everybody else is in the same situation we are in, that has never surfaced. And just out of curiosity, the last time that we sat down with him last week, I threw it out to him, hey, have you checked lately to see if there's any demo trucks available? And he says, well, I haven't checked in a while. Let me check and I'll get back to you. And I almost fell out of my chair a couple hours later when he called me and said, yeah, there actually are 2 trucks that are on the line, and one of them is due to be delivered, or due to be completed in January. And I had told him that, if it was something that could fit the needs of the department, because we've all had the discussion that, we may, can you take something less and make it work? Originally, we wanted more water on the truck so that down the road when we were ready to get rid of the tanker, we had something with extra water on it. I've researched, we've checked almost weekly the used fire market, and in over a year, there's only been 2 trucks that have even come close to matching what we were looking for. And one was a 1989 truck, which is older than what we were replacing. And the other truck was the same vintage as our newest truck, Engine 1. It was 18 years old. And the price they wanted for that was close to $500,000 for an 18-year-old truck.
You're getting a good trade-in value is what you're saying.
No, we won't. We won't. We're not getting anything for our truck. So anyways, he did get back to me and said that he had a truck. And then came back and said, I'm really sorry, but that truck is already spoken for and sold. He says, however, I have a second truck that came up. He says it's made out of stainless steel, which my little flags went up everywhere, because stainless steel is originally what we were looking for. It's longevity, especially where we keep trucks for 20 or 25 years. A stainless steel truck has a 25-year warranty on it. And that's what everybody is actually going to. Originally, when the committee met to do the fire truck, we were looking at stainless steel, but then when we found out that it added $80,000 to $100,000 to the price tag of a truck, we decided to throw that out. So this truck was put on the line a year and a half ago. What happens is Greenwood Fire Apparatus, they're in North Attleboro, Mass. They are the dealership for Emergency One trucks for the Northeast. They sell predominantly to Boston, Manchester, anybody that owns an Emergency One truck. Most cities use Emergency One. So what they do is they know that they're going to sell these trucks, and everybody is looking for the trucks. So what they'll do is they'll front money and get something that's kind of a spec that they think somebody can work with, and they'll put it on the line. They never tell the salesman. They don't put it on their website. They wait until it gets to a certain point in the process, and then they'll tell their salespeople, hey, we have a truck available. Just like how we all like to go to the mall in New Hampshire and actually physically see, some certain items that you want to buy. You want to touch it, you want to feel it, you want to see the quality of it. That's what they do with these demonstrator trucks. For the last 3 years, that's what we've been doing. Every now and again, you'd see a fire truck at the station. That was a demonstrator. But unfortunately, those demonstrators that we were seeing were already spoken for. So when they came over, it was the understanding of whatever department had purchased them that they would be able to show the truck to certain many departments. So when he came back to me and told me I have a stainless steel truck, and then he told me basically 90% of our bid spec is this truck. It's the same cabin chassis that we were looking at. It's the same compartmentation because we're an all hazards department. We respond to numerous types of emergencies. So unlike a city department that has a ladder truck that carries extrication equipment, and Manchester has a heavy rescue that carries other equipment for water emergencies and whatnot, we have to carry everything on our trucks. So we need the extra storage space to be able to handle the various emergencies we deal with. So when he came back, the truck was actually the 656, and I couldn't believe the price. I'm like, how can you even offer me a truck that's stainless steel? I know what a stainless steel truck goes for at this price. And he says, because we're not looking to make any extra money on the truck. We're looking to get what we put into the truck. And a year and a half ago, there were no 4 or 5 price increases. We weren't into this market that we're into now. So that's why we're able to get this truck at such a reduced price. And then the next thing was, I was like, okay, well, when is this truck going to be done? And he says, this truck actually will be done probably sometime in February. And he said that, by the time it gets fitted up and whatnot, and you guys have your town meeting, if your townspeople support it, he says, once we do whatever we need to do to letter it for Litchfield and do whatever, he says, you could probably have this truck by the end of March, early April of 2023.
If it's coming off the line in February and we could potentially get it, in March or after town meeting, when's the demo period? When do they show it to other people?
So he hadn't gotten into anything with that, but there is a possibility he could say to us, hey, can you show us our truck? Last year, we were looking at another truck in the town of Amherst, got a brand new truck. And I talked to somebody over there and said, hey, would you mind bringing it over so our committee could take a look at it? So they took one of their members and they drove over here and sat here for 2 hours so that we could go through their truck and check it all out.
So part of the deal is that you'd help show
You'd
it.
have to show it for a period of time.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, I'm not saying that we're going to be going all over the state with it. I mean, if somebody wants to see it, they can certainly come here and look at it. But when we were looking at fire trucks before, we went to the town of Bow, we went to Hooksett, we went to Manchester. We went all around and did our tours on the various models that we were looking at so that we could
understand
figure
that.
out
Okay,
which
thank
truck was right
Yeah.
for us.
Yep.
But the reality is you probably do that anyway. So regardless of whether it's a demo or not, like, hey, I heard you got a new truck. Can I come check it out?
Right. And you know, right now, E1 has an outstanding record for fire apparatus. Years ago, it was another manufacturer called Pierce, which Londonderry and Nashua run, and now they're having nothing but problems with them. So right now, Emergency One is a truck that, you know, has a very outstanding record for excellence, and so we're excited. So
It's great. I think
that's where we're at.
I think Mr. Taylor said it a few weeks ago when we've talked about, you know, the school and the town finding, you know, making those extra phone calls, having those extra conversations to find cost savings. I think this is another perfect example of that. You all continue to be diligent and reaching out to people and asking those questions has found a potential great opportunity for the town. So thank you for that.
So, if I can ask a couple questions, because I've heard your presentation about this fire truck now for well over a year.
Yes, you have.
Yeah, and then last night again. But for the longest time, it was the amount of water that thing was gonna carry. That was the biggest purpose why you wanted a bigger engine to carry more water. But yet, all of a sudden, last night, you turned on that and said, well, it's got a bigger pump, so we don't need as much water.
So the original thinking behind building the new truck was originally when we came before the CIP, we were looking to replace two trucks. We were looking to replace engine 2 and tanker 3, which is the large Mack tanker. Tanker 3 holds 2,500 gallons of water. Now that we have extra hydrants in town, we don't know exactly where we sit as far as needing a tanker, because when I started in 1987 and we had Southern New Hampshire Water Company, the town of Litchfield did not want to pay for fire hydrants. But because Southern New Hampshire had their water service, they needed to have fire hydrants set up so that they could go through and clean the system periodically. So they were just dropping hydrants wherever it was convenient for them. There was no rhyme or reason. So we have some fire hydrants that were more than 1,000 feet away, and there, like I said, there was no rhyme or reason to it. It was however it benefited them to service the system. Then the planning board, and through NFPA regulations and everything, we came up with a standard. Our fire trucks carry 1,000 feet of hose on it. If you have a fire that's beyond 1,000 feet, you need 2 trucks. You're tying 2 trucks up just to pump water. Now you don't have all the extra equipment and everything at the fire scene because it could be a mile down the roadway. And it's time consuming to set up a hose lay, tie up that extra personnel to do it. So by having the tanker ensures that we have that extra water. One of the last fires that we had on Brenton Street, now Brenton Street has plenty of hydrants on it, but one of them was a 1,700-foot lay, and the other closest one was, I think, like 1,300. We had 4 trucks tied up just to give us water supply. So when we looked at, when Chief Freitzell and I originally looked at making the standard for this new truck, we figured where we don't know what we're gonna need for water, plus there's other things that are coming up too, right? We have hybrid electric cars. If you read in the news, when those things catch on fire, you need lots of water. There's no guarantee we're gonna be near a hydrant when somebody's car catches on fire. So we need to be prepared to be able to handle any of these situations. So when we were looking at the truck, we figured if we put an extra 500 gallons of water on this engine, then eventually, a few years from now, we can say, you know what, we don't really need the tanker anymore. It can go away, we won't replace it, and then we'll have less equipment that we have to maintain, and, you know, that was the route we were going. But what we didn't figure into all of this is what we just found out in the last year, is that you gotta wait 2 years to get the truck. From all the research we've done on used trucks, tankers are a dime a dozen. So I had somebody evaluate our tanker. Our tanker's a 1991, but it doesn't run out on the calls that the engines run on, so it doesn't have the wear and tear. Somebody came back and said, this is probably one of the best Mack tanker trucks I've seen, and it's in really great shape. You guys would be crazy not to keep this truck and basically run it into the ground. So the thinking that we had moving forward when we were talking about buying used equipment is, I can't touch an engine with the water that I need on it. I gotta wait 2 years to get it. It's gonna cost the town $740 to possibly $800,000 to get it. I'm not losing any water. Right now, tomorrow, if we back that new truck in the station and the old engine 2 goes away, I have exactly the same amount of water I have today. Down the road, if I get to the point where, you know what, I don't need the tanker, it goes away, one less truck we have to deal with. If I find that we actually need that extra water, I can go online and I've found trucks that were 3 to 5 years old. They look beautiful. They're half the price of a fire engine, and they're plentiful to get anywhere in the country. So that was the reason I said, you know what, I can live with keeping and replacing in kind what I already have, and then we'll deal with the tanker down the road somewhere once we have more statistics and figure out whether we actually need it.
So you mentioned last time, you mentioned again today too, that it has about 90% of what you want. Is there anything major of that 10% it doesn't have that?
No, so out of that, so the other thing that we were looking at is when you're looking at putting that extra water that we originally wanted to do, we had to beef up the frame rails on the truck. We had to go to the next size cab so that we had everything. So by downsizing, we have a lot of pluses. It's the same exact engine as our engine 1. So to be user-friendly for our guys to get accustomed to the truck and get seat time on it. The 90% of the bid spec was most of the water, was losing that 500 gallons of water. But other than that, the compartmentation and everything else that's on there is exactly what's in our bid spec.
Nice.
Any additional discussion for Article 7?
Just have 2 quick questions. Question number 1, you had mentioned as far as the existing truck that we'd be getting rid of. There's nothing that we can get for that? I mean, if I just look at it and
No,
go, you know what, look, if demand is that high out there, some small town would probably love to be able to snag that from us, even if it was $50,000. You know what, $50,000 pays for part of our communication tower bill for next year. Like, is there any chance of being able to get anything?
That truck is so tired and so gone, I wouldn't offer it to my best friend, honestly.
Do you have any enemies that you can look at? Because I do like money, and if we can get some scrap, something.
So the trade-in on that truck is a little over $7,000. The pump needs to be replaced, so it's a $35,000 job on it. There's a lot of other gremlins that are in it, and we've chosen not to put the money into it. But unfortunately, in the last 3 months, actually longer than the last 5 months, because we lost engine 1 for a while for work. And engine 4, actually, I do have to tell you that I just found out today that hopefully next week we should have engine 4 back, which will be nice. But engine 2 is very tired. We just did some work. It has a ladder rack because the ladder is so heavy on the truck. There's a hydraulic ladder rack that comes down on the truck. It's been Achilles' heel since we've owned the truck. We recently replaced every part on it, and somehow today it doesn't work.
Oh, no.
So, the truck is tired. We're gonna strip as much equipment off of it as we can to put on the new truck. And then basically what the sales guy told me is, we're being nice, we're giving you $7,000 for it. He says, but it's gonna go down in North Attleboro, it's gonna sit outside, and a truck's gonna come pick it up and bring it to a crusher.
All right, then question number 2, and this actually got triggered in my mind in terms of a constant question I'm going to ask. During the school board meeting yesterday, I was a little bit surprised that there was something that got brought up about surge protection on the LMS project, and that wasn't included in there. So now at this point, my antenna's up that we're going to ask this about everything. This number here, 658,899, this has everything that we need. We're not missing something / cutting corners or anything like that, that all of a sudden we're going to come back later on in an ECO and say, oh, you know what, we need another $50,000 on this one?
No, anything that's in the truck, they're minor little things, lights and stuff like that, that we can absorb out of our regular new equipment line.
And it's compatible with our venting system that hooks up.
Yeah, actually, the truck is set up for our venting system. It already has it on it.
And it will fit in the doors, right?
Yes, that's one thing you don't have to worry about. It's the same length as engine 4, so it's actually really good because it's no bigger than any of the trucks that we currently have.
Thank you.
Any additional discussion?
No, so, I think it's awesome that we have a solution for this one. I would like to see, maybe next year after we settle this out, the plan going forward, because obviously these trucks aren't cheap. What's the next one we need to start thinking about replacing, and should we start stocking away money when we're getting potentially 4 or 5% interest in bank accounts?
Engine 4 is the next one to go. That's the 2001. That's when it's currently having $22,000 worth of work to put into it. And all the work that we've done on Engine 1 and Engine 4, it's just regular maintenance items. It's stuff that they found. I mean, Engine 4, they just found when they were going to undercoat it last week that there's some welds that had broken on it that support the water tank. Those are things you won't find on a regular inspection. Generally, a lot of fire departments, and we used to do it a long time ago when I first started in the department, when an engine gets to the 15-year age, usually you send it out for a refurbishment. And a refurbishment is on the tune nowadays of like $250,000. But what they do is they strip everything down, they take care of all the rust, they repaint everything, they redo welds and everything you find, they repaint the truck if it needs to be repainted, and then you can gain another 15 or plus years out of it. We only did that, actually Engine 2 has been refurbished once, and I believe Engine 4 was refurbished once. Engine 1's never been done.
So just my point is, I like the proactive planning. I don't want to say, oh crap, we need 500 grand to replace a truck. But if we know in 3 to 5 years we're going to need 500 grand, let's start planning for it.
Yep.
Like, let's start finding, because it's less painful to do.
Most departments now, I've talked to all the area departments, they sock about 150,000 a year into a fund, and then what happens is once they get to $800,000, they still have to come before the Board of Selectmen and the Budget Committee and say, I have a capital reserve fund with $800,000 in it. I'd like to take $700,000 of it towards the purchase of a fire truck.
Right, so I mean, I know when we were in the capital improvement planning committee, I'd asked for, what's your plan? Like, annualize the expenses and come up with that number, whether it's 150,000 or something less. But at least let's have a basis for that number, and let's start saving and benefiting from interest rather than paying it.
Generally, you keep it for all departments, and,
Right.
and we still have the conversation about police cars, right? I mean, we've got those. We still have conversations about needs over at Highway. We really need to sit down and develop a town plan on what the needs are and how we're going to fund these.
I would love to see it. I would love it.
Mr. Hayes, I know you have a question, sir.
Yeah, it's a question that's not going to influence my decision probably, but on the fire truck in question, on the warrant, you mentioned 25-year warranty. What is the warranty for the engine, transmission, and all of the other assemblies, specifically?
So I could get you that rundown, but on average, it's a 10 to 12-year warranty. A lot of the new fire trucks now are coming, the lowest warranty right now is like a 10-year warranty. Even the paint warranty on the truck is a 10 or a 12-year non-prorated because, Emergency One is very good. Our Engine 1 that we have now, when we purchased it from them years ago, when we came up on that 9th year, almost 10th year, they actually called us and said, hey, you got a 10-year warranty on your paint on this truck, and it's about to expire. You should have us come and evaluate it or bring it to be evaluated. We brought it down there, and they did all these repairs on the truck at no cost to us because it was covered under that 10-year warranty. So they're a very reputable company, but there are all kinds of, the transmissions, as far as what you're talking about, it's a Cummins engine, so most trucks nowadays only have a Cummins engine in it, and they do have, I believe that is a 10-year warranty.
And similar, the transmission would be 10 years?
Yeah, all the fire trucks all have Allison transmissions, and it's the same thing that Continental Paving and everybody else uses on their trucks, and they all come with those warranties.
Thank you.
Any additional discussion?
Call it.
All right. Vote to recommend. Motion's been made, seconded, so roll call vote. Ms. Hirschberger?
Yes.
Mr. Leary?
Yes.
Ms. Douglas?
Yes.
I am a yes. Ms. Stevens?
Yes.
Mr. Taylor?
Yes.
Mr. Barca?
Yes.
Mr. Bork?
Yes.
And Mr. Hayes.
Yes.
Motion carries to recommend Article 7 by the Budget Committee 9-0-0. Thank you. Thank you, gentlemen.
You're welcome.
All right. Well, at the rate we're going, 90 minutes for 4 articles. I think we'll be here until about 1 or 2 in the morning, so I'll try to speed us up a little bit. Our next article that we have is Article 8, Property Revaluation Expendable Trust Fund. Shall the town vote to raise and appropriate $25,000 to be placed in the Property Revaluation Expendable Trust Fund as previously established? This sum to come from the unassigned fund balance and no amount to be raised from new taxation. Estimated 2023 tax rate impact, $0. Recommended by the Board of Selectmen, 410. 2 notes for this article. The November balance is $50,026. Note
guys.
2, the goal is to establish a $100,000 balance by 2024. Next revaluation is 2025.
Make a motion to recommend Article 8.
A motion and a second. Discussion.
Who voted, why would, any ideas as to why someone would vote against this?
That would be me.
Why did you vote against this?
I've long been a proponent of, we spend $100,000 every 5 years, that we go out and get competitive bidding. Have other companies look at this contract and see if they can do us better. And I keep getting voted down, but that's okay.
I don't disagree that we
I
should do a
can live with it.
competitive bid. My concern is that this is for that big bill that comes at the end, so I agree with your sentiment. I think we need the money set aside.
Any additional discussion? All right. Roll call vote. Ms. Hirschberger?
Yes.
Mr. Leary?
No. I'm consistent.
Ms. Douglas?
Yes.
I'm a yes. Ms. Stevens?
Yes.
Mr. Taylor?
Yes.
Mr. Barca?
Yes.
Mr. Bork?
Yes.
And Mr. Hayes.
Yes.
Not a fan.
All right. Article 8 recommended by the Budget Committee by a vote of 8-1-0. Article 9, Fire Weekend Coverage. Shall the town vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $24,320 to fund the fire station approximately 32 hours per weekend effective April 1st, 2023? These hours would be filled with on-call firefighters, therefore there would be no associated benefits or other related costs. Estimated 2023 tax rate impact is 2 cents. This was recommended by the Board of Selectmen by a vote of 5-0-0.
Make a motion to recommend Article 9.
Can we?
Motion.
Second.
Yeah, I mean, we can make the motion to recommend, but then we can vote.
Yeah, that's
No, I'm just saying there's no room in the, I'm just like, we can't end up with a positive recommendation on this without
We'd
a
have to
change.
vote against it.
But you want to cut
we can.
$24,320.
$24,000.
No, I'm just saying though, okay, you'd have to remove money from the budget in order to recommend this currently.
Yes.
I'm only
Okay, I'm just making sure
recommending for a vote. Yep.
I just wanna make sure I understand where we are.
We are
Alright.
currently $1 under the tax cap.
Alright.
If Article 5,
Yep.
were to get voted in.
So Doug, is there anything you'd like to offer up in your budget to trade off for this?
So we had a motion and a second discussion.
Sorry.
You want my chair, my desk?
Discussion.
So that kind of leads me to my point is there anything, going into this, you were looking at best case scenario, you were gonna get your new truck probably when you and I both had a lot more gray hairs. Now all of a sudden you are going to get it in March or April if it's approved. And now at this point, you're not looking at the potential of repairs on the nearly dead truck for your budget this year. do you have room then in your repair budget that you would be able to carve out some of, if not all of the 24,320, so that it would give us the ability to vote for it?
That budget,
But we also don't know what the Board of Selectmen's plan is for the chief and the staffing going forward either, right? So, because currently the budget has 2 full-time and a part-time chief. Right now, we have a full-time interim, another full-time, and no part-time chief. So, depending on how they staff the currently, maybe they could find the money.
vehicle repairs and maintenance for fire department currently is $30,000. We reduced it by $5K during our regular budget season.
It's still also go to warrant.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, the only thing I guess I could offer is, I know is if we replenish the revolving repair fund, then there's a opportunity that we could probably cut some money out of repairs and hope that no other further repairs are needed to the other 2 trucks that are just getting repaired now. But I do think, playing devil's advocate, I mean, this is a really important thing for the fire department to have the weekend coverage. I guess I'll just read you what I have for the requests, and you can go from
Yep.
there. But so Litchfield Fire Rescue is a combination fire department, both career and paid on-call staff. The department is composed of 2 full-time firefighters, a part-time fire chief, a part-time fire inspector, and approximately 24 on-call firefighters. Similar to what is being experienced in other fire departments in the state, or for any job for that matter, our department roster in its height in the 2000s, we had almost 40 call firefighters. We now have 24. In the 2000s, the fire department was responding to an average of 500 calls per year with a decent-sized call force. Over the last 12 years, our average call volume number has jumped 150 calls to an average of 650 calls per year over the last 12 years. This number is for routine emergencies and incidents and does not include large duration or multiple day events, which could push those numbers hundreds of calls higher. Last year in 2022, the department responded to an incredible 728 calls for service. Through research, we found that the surrounding fire departments around us were also experiencing an 8 to 10% increase in call volume, which in turn makes them too busy to respond to help us and may make it where we have to go help them. We have no slow day. Each day we receive calls. Some days are busier than others. Just like what was explained before, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday are our busiest days of the week. But on average, we're doing 12 to 14% calls every day. Why does this matter? During the course of the last 12 years, we were responding to an average of 32 calls per month. During the last several years, that number doubled to 64 calls per month. And last year, in 2022, we were responding to 70 to 80 calls per month. Even with that large increase in calls, we are also experiencing multiple calls received simultaneously or stacked calls received within a short time frame, which requires more people to cover those calls. Every day of the week is equally busy responding to calls for service, but Saturday and Sunday are our 2 busiest days. Those are the days when all the town fields are busy with games, friends and family do get-togethers, and also people leave town for the day to enjoy their weekend. During the weekday, the 2 full-time firefighters respond to the majority of calls, backed up by the call force for larger incidents. There is no full-time coverage on the weekend, and the fire station is not manned. The call force has done an outstanding job, and we all do the best we can to be around to cover all the calls. No calls have ever gone unanswered, but the strain it puts on our firefighters and EMTs is coming to a boiling point. Their families try to juggle the kids, sports, and spend family time as well as vacations. It's been putting some strains on marriages and relationships as the call force tries to juggle between both family and community protection. Last year, the department responded to 200 calls on the weekend alone. Saturday calls for 2022 were 117, and Sunday calls were 81. The men and women of Litchfield Fire Rescue are your neighbors, friends, family, and co-workers who give much of their free time to protect you and your families while still holding down regular full-time jobs. They spend hundreds of hours a year obtaining certified fire and medical classes with almost weekly fire department training to keep their skills honed. The majority of the department are Litchfield taxpayers like you and me, and we are all mindful of what purchases we make and when we request additional services to the fire department to provide adequate emergency coverage to the community. Our members are getting stretched thin. Some are feeling burnt out. Every department in this community has either increased hours or added more personnel. Litchfield Fire Rescue has the same 2 full-time firefighters as we did in 1986 when it began full-time. Other departments, police, highway, town clerk, library, transfer station, have all added extra personnel in the last 30 years as the town has grown. The fire department has seen more than 100% increase in calls during the last 30 years, but are expected to still do it with 2 people and only on weekdays. We did have weekend hours for a few years in 2010, 2011, but due to default budgets and belt tightening on budgets, as we're discussing tonight, this service was cut to save money. What would the weekend hours look like? There would be 2 firefighter EMTs from 8 to 4 p.m. Saturday and Sunday to handle average calls. These calls include medical emergencies, car accidents, carbon monoxide leaks, propane incidents, lift assists, alarm activations, initial response to fire calls, water problems, assisting the police, illegal burns. We are an all hazards department, and on average, it only takes 3 to 4 minutes. I'm sorry, I screwed myself up. I apologize. We're an all hazards department. 3 to 4 minutes absolutely can greatly affect both patient outcomes and hazard mitigations. Our average response time town-wide responding from the fire station, if somebody is there, is between 1 to 7 minutes anywhere in town. When somebody stops breathing, if you were watching the Bills game that happened the other day, in less than 8 minutes without oxygen, people bring somebody back after 8 minutes of no oxygen. So time is very critical for us, and that's whether there's a fire, whether somebody's having anaphylactic shock, plenty of people have peanut allergies, or whatever other medical emergency could happen. So with that, getting to the fire station, if our guys are at home, adds 3 to 5 minutes to the response time if they live right in this geographic area around the fire station. Otherwise, it could be greater. Some other factors to consider are weather conditions. If it's snowy, icy, or whatever, it's going to take our guys longer to get on the road because they're going to clean their cars and try to get here safely. The firefighters on duty would be available to write fire permits, attend town events that normally may require hiring a paid detail, train and do maintenance on fire equipment, give tours of the fire station, and clean and upkeep of the fire station. I understand the fiscal problems that are going on in the town. Public safety is very important. The quality of our people is very important. Our people, we've always done more with less, always. And we continue to do that, and we will continue to do that. I just had a lieutenant that's been on for 9 years, just give his resignation letter the other day because his wife gave him an ultimatum because he's down with the fire department too much and not spending enough family time. It's a problem. And by having 2 people there and we have people assigned, it alleviates some of the other people to go about their family business and do the things they need to do without worrying about being in town. They don't get paid to stay in town, the call department, and we have one on-call officer that gets paid on a weekend $25 to stay in town. I had another guy that quit because his girlfriend said, you know what, I'll give you the $25, you make more in overtime at your regular job, go work at your regular job. We're having problems getting people going to calls because just like what we talked about, the cost of everything is going up. And they can make more money at their regular jobs doing overtime than staying here to protect this community. That's the problem that we have, and that's why I'm requesting this extra coverage.
Thank you.
Thank you. So,
Questions, discussion?
well, actually, we need to make a motion so that if I want to be able to vote to support that warrant article, I need to be able to find it somewhere else in the budget. I'd like to make a motion to reduce the line item on library, line 4450.20-123, wages assistant librarian. Reduce that budget line item by $31,000. Wait a second.
That's an existing position.
Yeah.
Yep. You know what? To reduce that by $24,320. That would not eliminate the position.
Can you repeat that line
Yep.
item, just the line item again?
Is
I don't see the
Line
link to
item.
get
Where
to
did
the.
it
ne-
go?
I know. Are you
You have to
looking
link
forward
to
to
the,
it?
yeah, you
yeah,
have
there's
to,
a link in the town
Yeah,
budget
hit
to
the
get to it.
library
I
budget
am
line.
there. It's not
In the, I'm in the spreadsheet, the 4550
Yeah.
library, but I don't see the link anymore.
I'm sorry, say that again,
Yep.
Mr. Taylor, line
Line
123?
11-4450.
Yep.
.20-123, wages dash assistant librarian.
Thank you. All right, we have a motion.
I'll second.
Second.
Second by Mr. Hayes.
Yeah, I can't get to it. but-
Discussion.
Let's see.
I don't think you can pit two employees against each other.
I mean, honestly, what you were talking about before, if it means taking money out of the repair line and we play that Russian roulette with fixing trucks, and that's what we do, but I just.
So here would be the only thing, and I appreciate that. You would be able to give it to me 1 year, and then the problem is the same thing that I always complain about, that, you know what, this is going to be a residual one that is going to happen every year, yet you're not gonna be able to give me that repair every single year. This is a like for like. It's not pitting one position against another. It is taking one recurring line item and reducing that recurring line item to fund this recurring line item and making it a
Pitting
net
one
zero.
position against the other.
But no matter what, I have to come up with something recurring to offset something recurring.
Right. It doesn't have to be a position though.
What else do we have that is like?
Even though it's a bottom line budget, if the Board of Selectmen wants to fund that position, they can do that.
Are there any more lines that have that fuel?
If we
Can
take
they
like
do that?
15,000
I
from
don't
the
think they
repairs
can.
and then another 10,000 from gas or something.
Yeah,
again,
and
it's a bottom
also
line
just
budget.
maybe a small amount,
But I
you
don't
did
know that they
mention
can
in the
do that for the
letter that
library.
you read that maybe
Maybe they'll play nice.
some some detail would not be involved. Is that what you're talking about?
He did, yeah.
Right, so is there
The
something
police
we
department
can
did some.
squeeze from
It
there?
depends on what comes up, but you know, yeah, I mean, we would try to make it work out, obviously, but.
I mean, because we've already done that, right? We took a position from the police department that they need but can't fill, and we took the money from that. So we've already taken position money. I mean, I appreciate that some positions are, you know, everybody's got their,
That's not one-to-one because that position is filled.
that
And the
position was
person
authorized
is-
by the voters.
Right, and the position is filled and held. That's
So-
not taking hours away from somebody working in town right now.
Sure, I mean, I also think the library's overstaffed, so I'm okay with that.
It's the same thing, we're seeing the same thing in fire as you're seeing in library. You're not getting the volunteer firefighters. You can't have volunteer librarians anymore. So why would you take away from one group?
Yeah, I think the
to
library's
fund
just as
another.
important. I think we can find.
It all depends on where you wanna come from, like,
I'd be happy to support somebody presenting
I-
another line item.
I,
But it's gotta be
It would
recurring.
yeah.
yeah, I mean, I struggle with essentially cutting an existing employee to support the warrant article. Is the warrant article important? Absolutely. Could we try to find that $24,000, $24,320 somewhere else? I feel like that's a better option than the library.
But again, to Ms. Taylor's point, that'd be for 1 year.
You're
figure it out
totally,
again next year.
totally right. Yeah, I agree.
So realistically, if we're gonna be facing these issues, we have to look at the structural issues of our town. Can we continue to staff things the way we're staffing them? If we're gonna be constrained by various tax things, we're gonna have to make the decision of which are life critical and which are not. And it stinks and it's not fair and it's gonna make somebody unhappy. But the reality is, currently, we have a budget cap we have to work within. So we're gonna have to make those trade-offs. We have to make those decisions. And nobody's ever gonna be everybody happy all the time. I actually,
Why can't we take it from the repairs and
I think it's really
I don't
scary
under-
to start
I
talking
know,
about
I
taking money from repairs.
don't
when
wanna
you keep
do
talking
that.
about it.
Okay.
I just don't understand the recurring argument.
The recurring is the fact that, you know what, if the chief, or, I'm sorry, whatever title you're supposed to have, Mr. Nickel, and apologize if then at that point it's unprofessional. My point is that he can give me $24,000 this year out of his repair, but next year he's going to throw that money back in, versus a staffed position is something that is going to be budgeted for this year, next year, next year, next year, next year. He's asking for something that is going to be budgeted this year, next year, next year, next year. I need the two to balance out.
If the
But if
voters
you take
approve
it
it
out
to
of-
be added as a position, and the voters approve it to be added as a position.
Right, and then we run into the same problem that we've talked about before, is that, okay, so then the tax cap of $175,000, we buy this communications tower, and guess what? Now at this point, basically, 150 of the 175 tax cap is already eaten up because the voters aren't looking at it long-term and are going ahead and digging a grave in the future. Actually, you know what, can I withdraw my motion and make a different one, please?
Motion withdrawn. Mr. Taylor.
All right. Then I would like to make a motion to reduce line items, well, I guess it's not a line item, it is the additional hours.
Are you in fire?
No, I'm in library.
Okay.
The additional hours for the assistant librarian
isn't that
that
under warrant?
totals,
An article.
that one is?
Yeah, it's
Yes.
number 13 or 14?
Yes, that's one of our warrant articles.
13.
Because I was gonna add that with the, health insurance payout.
I realize this is the same problem that Mr. Taylor was talking about. Is there an opportunity for the fire department protective gear to leverage ARPA or end of year fund balance to purchase that? That's $23,000.
I think they already bought it.
We've spoken.
Harper's
Harper's
spoken for.
yeah.
Yeah, we ordered it a year ago.
And that's a recurring cost that should be in
I
the
know.
budget.
Yeah, I
It's
know.
just- Like I said, I think at some point, we actually should take an assessment of, and it stinks for all the departments, how are we staffed, and do we need to be staffed the way we're staffed? Does that mean we have to do some realignments? Possibly.
Well, you know, another thing that's reoccurring, if you stop and think about this, the town right now has, year end, you're gonna be about $100,000 over, right? Right. So, and every year they're over. The money doesn't come back to the town. So I would say we expend $25,000 every year of their surplus that'll cover the coverage. So we cut something right now for $25,000 that they can purchase before year end, so it'll be covered.
We already cut the
Right,
police
yeah.
position, and that was the intent.
Not talking about
That was
20.
my thought.
So you're
it's-
proposing to pay for
No.
this
So-
out of
Every year.
end of year fund balance?
No, I'm saying,
Cut something else they can pay
cut
for.
something else that they can pay for before year end, and we have our 25,000. And you know, every year,
I
you
see.
can, there's gonna be at least
But we're
25,000.
past year end.
Past year end,
Yeah,
That's what he means
yeah.
with
December.
Anything would have had to have already been purchased and encumbered
Oh, yeah,
and
'cause
legally
that-
bound.
yeah.
as of when?
2020.
So the school year
Of the
ends
end of the-
June 30th,
Yeah.
their year ends December
December.
31st.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, that's, yeah.
So, right, so right now you have $100,000.
Which will go
Up to
into,
$5.
it'll go into unassigned, yeah.
So I guess
Can't spend any of that right now?
It's already spent in a bunch of warrant articles in front of you, so
No, because
So I
voters
get-
haven't voted for it.
Right,
Right,
but
so
it
is there
will
anything
be.
in the budget currently that is being requested for this year, because we've started this year, that could be applied to end of year fund balance to free up that money, right? That's what you're asking, basically.
No, so I guess next year, we're just gonna have to do it before January
No, because
first.
We're in
our
20
budget year has started.
We're in 23, right?
Right, we have end of year fund balance, because you're gonna bank it, right?
Right, it'll go into.
So-
Support, right.
Right, so, but the way that they work, they're already spending the budget we haven't actually approved yet, like, is essentially how it works.
Correct.
It's really, theoretically. So you could say, you know what, the computers that John would like, we're gonna pay for the end of year budget if it's approved, and then you free up the line item in the current budget. Could we do that? Or, what, you're here so I can talk to you, that's all. But that's where you're going. That's where you're going, yes. Is there a purchase in this budget that could be added as a separate warrant article for an
No,
end
but
of
then
year?
we can't
We still
recommend
can't
that either,
recommend.
though. so
No,
we're
if it's
saying-
end of year, if it's
Oh.
fund balance
Unassigned
is
fund
zero.
balance, $0 tax impact.
So basically, it's like when the school pre-purchases their computers for the
Yeah.
next year out of this year's budget to remove it for next year.
25,000 every year.
Or is there one other option that we can do as well? This way it doesn't impact anybody personally, but yet it still meets what Mr. Burke is talking about, that there is going to be end-of-year funds that you can use for it. Could I reduce debt budget by $25,000? That way it's not impacting anyone
Actually,
personally.
I asked Mr. Leary to ask the selectmen to vote, as they did last year, to pay down the fire department bond.
We're asking about the impact fees, right?
Yeah, and so if they had taken that move, we would have been in a different situation, because.
Right, but I hear what
But
Mr.
the-
Taylor's saying. Could you, we're in 23, we have $260,000 in debt service. Could we cut 25,000 from that, and then you use part of your unassigned fund balance to,
But then you're essentially, in order to keep this going, have to commit to using that every year.
But that's the beauty
Because-
part. By using the debt service, we get a long time to pay off that fire station. So then at that point, you know that it's gonna be, the fire station's probably gonna be around just as long as
Well, what about if you
the
did it
we
towards
can help.
the tower? Like, you can take 25,000 off the tower.
communication?
Yeah, but the tower goes away after next
Yeah,
year.
which frees up money, though.
150K.
Right, but you need to do something this year.
Right, if I spend 25,000 out of the
They could
unassigned
anytime
fund
during the
balance to
year.
help offset that
Well, that's
payment,
what I say. Okay, cut it.
then I could use that money to help them with this.
Yeah, whether it's
Knowing that,
Use the same.
whether it's debt service or communication tower, it's the same.
exactly,
That's my question. Can I do it? And then at that point, they'll figure it out because it's a bottom line
See
budget.
why-
I think what,
Ms. Kleiner, yes or no?
Yes,
Yes, I can?
whether it's debt service or whether it's communication tower, it's the same principle would apply.
Brilliant.
All right.
That's your
So-
statement.
It's still gonna go back into the budget at some point, and then debt service can be added, 25,000 can be
From
added
the-
back to that at some point.
well, because eventually, well, if
In
you
a-
did the
in an
communication tower, it
operating
gets paid off sooner, and then you free up your.
Right.
No, we'll make
But
sure
I-
that we
that's
pay,
what-
with debt service every year, the year-end funds.
I just
Right.
don't understand why we wouldn't just try to put
Yeah,
that
yeah,
back in
you
the budget,
can't,
because
you
either it's
can't
gonna
use
hit
impact fees for that.
the tax cap as a salary, or it's
You
gonna
have to use
hit
it for the fire station.
by a request for the operating
Can we
budget.
see,
So
how-
I
So
have
it
to
doesn't
get,
matter whether it's recurring.
see what happens with the
Well,
tax
but I
cap
mean,
in
this
March.
is,
Yeah.
this way at least there's one thing that I can consistently say, we're going to under budget.
Yep.
Force the hand of the town that they have to pay, because they can't default on it. To then at that point offset the fact that I am going to have in perpetuity this position.
I'm more comfortable with this than I am with people.
Okay,
Yep.
all right. So then,
Motion?
yes, motion to reduce line item number from,
472310, is that?
Yeah, my numbers are kind of.
47, I had 4711.10, debt service, principal.
Principal.
Yep, got it.
Reduce that line item by $25,000.
So a motion by Mr. Taylor, to have a second? Second by Mr. Bork. Discussion, any additional new discussion?
Does that cover what you need to cover?
I
Yes.
just don't
The
like
warrant
the-
is 24 something.
We
24,320.
just had, the only thing I don't like is that we just had somebody in here proposing a petition warrant article so that the full truth was on the warrant articles. And now we're doing some kind of shifty things? Like, is there still gonna be?
See,
So
the,
is the warrant article gonna give us like a? It should have that table underneath that says every year this is what this is gonna cost. Like the first year is gonna only cost this much. The second year is gonna cost this much because it's gonna be the full 12 months.
Mr. Leary,
So I
how
just
would,
wanna make
how
sure
would
that's
that
very,
show up?
very
Because if we approve it, would you have the town show that as first year would obviously be prorated because that position couldn't start until after
Right.
Call it April.
town, so I get sometime in March or April that the first year would be, I don't know, $22,000, but then in subsequent years it would be 24,000?
that's how they do it. When they do the police and the other stuff, that's how they do it.
Okay.
You're right.
Okay, I
So
just didn't see it on here.
Year one
so-
would be less, you're right, because it would be
9 months is
75% of that number, right?
No,
Yeah,
they've done that in the past.
I'm sticking to my $25,000.
yeah, that's fine. Any additional discussion?
And from the perspective of, truth and stuff here, is you're actually using it to pay an existing expense. We're not using it to expand, to provide a new service. It's something that actually is better because you're paying down debt,
Right.
like, with money you already have.
Right, from the unassigned fund.
So it's,
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh, this motion. Okay.
So, yeah, right, where it's going here, when they say, money towards the whatever they choose to put the payment towards, it's money we already have to a debt we already owe. We're not expanding anything.
We're just forcing the selectmen to use
Yeah,
unassigned
yeah,
funds
right,
to
you
pay
could
this.
kept it in the budget, and they could have taken it.
The voters can still vote against the people and still
Yeah.
have extra $25,000.
Right. Yeah, the
And-
position is still on the warrant.
Yes.
Could this
All right,
help us?
I'm gonna roll call, the motion to reduce 471110 debt service principal by $25,000. Ms. Hirschberger,
Yes.
Mr. Leary,
No.
Ms. Douglas.
Yes.
I'm a yes. Ms. Stevens,
Yes.
Mr. Taylor,
Yes.
Mr. Barca,
Yes.
Mr. Bork,
Yes.
and Mr. Hayes.
Yes.
So that motion carries 8-1-0. All right, back to our original motion of Article 9, Budget Committee recommending. Any additional discussion on that?
Please no.
Thank you. Ms. Hirschberger.
Wait, do we
Hold
have
on,
a
I
motion?
got.
We don't have a motion,
Hold
but
it.
we had a
I'll
motion
make
to
a
approve.
motion.
Brian made
Oh,
the
the
motion.
original.
No, there was
okay,
an
the
original motion and
So,
discussion. We kind of,
I
yes.
couldn't make the motion.
about halfway through,
We didn't have room
Yes.
for it. No,
Yeah.
I asked you for
Make the
it.
motion.
about halfway through our discussion
Oh, sorry,
of the
they did
cut, I
that,
realized we
sorry.
kind of left that original motion on the table and
yeah.
did nothing with it. So
Gotcha.
the motion was still there.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
So just restate it for
I'll
clarity.
restate it. The motion is to recommend Article 9 fire weekend coverage. Town vote, raise and appropriate a sum of $24,320 from the fire station, 32 hours per weekend, effective April 1, 2023. Estimated
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
estimated 2023 tax rate impact is 2 cents.
So the only question I would have had is, why 32 hours as opposed to 48? If it's so critical, why are we not covering the full weekend?
Well, obviously, it's more money in, not to mention after 4 o'clock, most people are back in town, or more people are in town. Our hard part is covering the early morning to mid-afternoons. That's when everybody wants to go out and run errands, go and, for a hike or whatever it is, and then usually most people are back by 4 o'clock in the afternoon.
Carry baby steps, a couple of years of full time.
Well, that would be my only concern, is that in voting for this, are we setting in motion, oh no,
Like the
so,
like the fire station, now you need a new fire truck. Yes, that's how it works.
so I understand. So I just,
Then the Christmas lights on it. I mean, come on. The budget just gets out of control.
All year round.
Took care of it.
so like,
I'm
I,
not gonna cut his electric.
Glad we can laugh.
no, but it's one of those, like, I agree in principle, but I don't know that I want to pay for a fully staffed, full-time, 24/7, 365 kind of
I
station.
see it as a very inexpensive insurance policy.
Yeah. Let's vote.
I agree. Call to vote. Ms.
Yeah,
Hirschberger.
say call
Yes.
the vote.
Mr. Leary.
Yes.
Ms. Douglas.
Yes.
I am a yes. Ms. Stevens.
Yes.
Mr. Taylor.
Yes.
Mr. Barca.
Yes.
Mr. Bork.
Yes.
And Mr. Hayes.
Yes.
Motion to recommend by the Budget Committee Article 9 fire weekend coverage passes 9-0-0.
Currently a cheap insurance policy. Give it 3 years.
All right. Article 10, thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you both for coming tonight.
guys.
Absolutely. We appreciate everything you all do. Thank you. All right, Article 10, General Assistance Expendable Trust Fund. Shall the town vote to raise and appropriate $10,000 to be placed in the General Assistance Expendable Trust Fund as previously established? This sum to come from the unassigned fund balance and no amount to be raised from new taxation. Estimated 2023 tax rate impact $0. Recommended by the Board of Selectmen 500. Note that the November balance on this is $10,022.
What is it today?
Probably a little bit
we
more.
just
We
got
wouldn't
that
have
from
had, we
John.
didn't have any expenditures out of it, but
Yeah,
we would have had a little bit of interest.
yeah.
Not
All right, so
$10,000.
that was my main question: is have we hit it yet?
Yeah,
So the answer is
yeah.
no.
Yeah.
Make a motion.
No, we,
Recommend Article 10.
Mr. Borg, have a second?
Sure.
Second by Ms. Douglas. Any discussion?
What's it used for?
so this is used for general assistance, like welfare.
Oh, okay.
The-
That's fine.
And of course, this is a period of time where we are particularly concerned. In the past, we've had a few, but we could cover it from the operating budget and haven't had to go into the fund. If you have a lot of residents this year that are needing heating assistance or other things that are over the qualifying for any state, you could get.
So even though we haven't hit this fund, how much have we spent out for those purposes?
To 20, oh, I didn't bring the budget. Yeah, I'm gonna
So
say
there have been
3, 4.
requests.
Oh,
We
yeah,
just absorbed
Yeah.
them into the general fund as opposed to this budget.
yes,
Yeah, I remember
Right,
you all
very
saying
little.
yeah.
that back in
It was a
December.
couple
You had
thousand.
absorbed some
Couple of
requests that
ranks.
had come in.
Yeah.
I think it's towards the end.
Any additional discussion? All right, roll call vote. Ms. Hirschberger,
Yes.
Mr. Leary,
Yes.
Ms. Douglas,
Yes.
I'm a yes. Ms. Stevens,
Yes.
Mr. Taylor,
Yes.
Mr. Barka,
Yes.
Mr. Bork,
Yes.
and Mr. Hayes.
Yes.
All right, recommended by the Budget Committee, Article 10 passes 9-0-0. Article 11, Fire Vehicle and Equipment Repair Expendable Trust Fund. Shall the town vote to raise and appropriate $40,000 to be placed in the Fire Vehicle and Fire Vehicle and Equipment Repair Expendable Trust Fund as previously established. This sum to come from the unassigned fund balance and no amount to be raised from new taxation. Estimated 2023 tax rate impact is $0. This was recommended by the Board of Selectmen 500. Two notes: the November balance of this expendable trust fund was $76,366. The Board of Selectmen had approved an expenditure up to $60K, and of that, $43,575 has been spent. Note 2 is that the goal is to establish a $75,000 balance.
Motion to recommend Article 11.
Motion by Mr. Bork. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Leary. Any additional discussion?
No, but just looking at what's left for the unassigned fund balance, this one won't even hit, which is a little,
Are you talking about
Awesome.
kind of where we are in the
yeah,
order? Yeah.
Huh? That's not how it works.
yeah, it does.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
it
what we
does.
talked about last
That's
time.
in the order. And they have
It comes
70
out of the unassigned fund balance, though.
Right,
It's
but it's
not like
already
the
gonna be-
school one.
It's gonna be spent already.
That's
If you
how
look at the
much
warrant
left.
articles above it, the cost
It
of money.
doesn't, they don't get funded the way the schools get funded.
It's coming out of their big,
They-
the
it comes out of their
$2 million
Point
pot
four.
that they have. That's accumulated year over
So
year.
we can bank that 100,000, and then all of the money that's in that pot can
Yeah.
fund all of these. So school and the town are different in that respect.
Got it.
Any additional discussion? All right, roll call vote. Ms. Hirschberger,
Yes.
Mr. Leary,
Yes.
Ms. Douglas.
Yes.
I'm a yes. Ms. Stevens,
Yes.
Mr. Taylor,
Yes.
Mr. Barka,
Yes.
I know I had to
Bork.
think about
Yes.
and Mr. Hayes.
Yes.
Motion passes 9-0-0. Article 11 recommended by the Budget Committee.
Back on track.
Article, we're getting there. Article 12, Public Works Expendable Trust Fund. Shall the town vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $60,000 to be placed in the Public Works Expendable Trust Fund as previously established? This sum to come from the unassigned fund balance and no amount to be raised from new taxation. Estimated 2023 tax rate impact is $0. Recommended by the Board of Selectmen 500. Two notes: the November balance on this expendable trust fund was $100,895. The Board of Selectmen approved an expenditure up to $60,000, and that $60,000 has been spent. Note 2 is that the goal is to establish a $100,000 balance.
Make a motion to recommend Article 12.
Motion by Mr. Bork. Do I have a second?
Yes.
Second by Ms. Douglas. Any discussion? Roll call vote. Ms. Hirschberger?
Yes.
Mr. Leary?
Yes.
Ms. Douglas?
Yes.
I'm a yes. Ms. Stevens?
Yes.
Mr. Taylor?
Yes.
Mr. Barca?
Yes.
Mr. Bork?
Yes.
And Mr. Hayes.
Yes.
Motion carries 9-0-0 for the Budget Committee to recommend Article 12. Article 13, additional assistant librarian hours. Shall the town vote to increase the weekly hours of assistant librarian number 2 position from 8 hours per week to 24 hours per week effective April 1, 2023 for an estimated annual wage, benefit, and other related cost of $13,312, and further vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $9,920 for wage, benefit, and other related cost for the period of April 1, 2023 to December 31, 2023. Estimated 2023 tax rate impact is 1 cent. There is a chart there that shows the breakdown of the wages and benefits for the April 1 to December 2023 wages, so Medicare, Social Security, and the same for 2024. And those are summed. This article was not recommended by the Board of Selectmen by a vote of 2 to 3.
Make a motion to recommend Article 13.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Bork, second by Mr. Taylor. Discussion.
Just to clarify, this, if we were to vote for this, we would have to find the money elsewhere.
That is a true statement. We would have to find $9,920.
The reason that the board did not recommend this was because this is based more on a want that the library has in that down the road, the head librarian is going to retire. Getting the person up to speed by giving her more hours so that eventually she can go into that position. But we felt she's been there for a while and she pretty much knows the system. And given the current budget climate, we didn't think it was wise to approve it.
And we cut this during the budget process.
Well, we asked
that-
them to pull it into a
Yeah,
warrant.
but we can't,
Correct,
yeah,
right.
we can't cut it.
Yeah, that's correct. Additional discussion.
I'm just glad to see that they put it on the warrant like we asked.
Well, I don't want it to be 0.
We were.
I'll vote no because I already think it's overstaffed. So.
I would argue that it's not necessarily just a want because, like every other department, the library is also attempting to grow. But just because of everything else that's on this year's, there really is no place that we can cut $9,000. I don't think from the town budget. But
agree.
I will probably vote yes because I just know that it's probably not going to pass.
And I think Mr. Barca said this earlier when we were talking about the fire. Even if we choose not to recommend it, the voters can still choose to put this in
Yes.
come March. All right. Any additional discussion?
Guess if it's that important, you could also vote to eliminate the 2-page positions and make the assistant full-time. One way to get the math to work if somebody wanted to do it.
It's a lot of math at 9:25. I hear you.
All mapped out.
Don't want to.
All right.
Calculator's broke.
Roll call vote. Ms. Hirschberger.
I'm gonna vote for it.
Mr. Leary.
No.
Ms. Douglas.
No.
I am a no. Ms. Stevens.
Yes.
Mr. Taylor.
No.
Mr. Barca.
Yes.
Mr. Bork.
No.
And Mr. Hayes.
No.
So that is not Article 13, not recommended by the Budget Committee by a vote of 3-6-0. And then Article 15, we don't have all the information on that yet, so there's nothing for us to take action on tonight. Is that correct?
14.
I'm sorry. Well, 14 doesn't.
there's no
Yeah,
budget
14 doesn't
impact.
have a budget impact, so we.
We'll remove that.
Yeah, we don't.
altogether.
Yeah, we don't. We would not vote on that. Article 15, we would, but do we have all the information to vote on that this evening? You saying?
I don't think we do we?
Well,
I thought I heard you say
unfortunately,
something earlier.
We're not going to have much more information than what we already have.
Yep.
Well, we
By-
can't vote to recommend it anyway, cause it's gonna cost something.
by deliberative?
We,
No.
There's no way of knowing
I
how many
don't-
people are involved in it.
Yeah, it was more or less just a legislative change, right?
Right.
And so it's kind of a house cleaning thing that more are eligible, but if it gets turned down, it goes back to $50, and we just upped it to $7.50.
but it could have
A
a
significant,
budget impact.
Yeah, oh, absolutely.
And so is the
And there's
reason
no
you,
way for us to tell what
cause there's no way to
The
quantify.
state included active duty people on this.
that was the change,
Yeah.
yeah.
That was the change that the state made.
And because you don't know that, we can't put the tax rate impact on there to know
We don't know, there's no way to know.
And how much do we have? We have like $1, $2?
$1.
$1.
Wait a minute,
It's
though.
gonna be larger than $1.
But you add this number back in after the tax caps,
Does it not?
so it doesn't affect it, right?
That would.
Yeah.
Yeah, it
Because that
doesn't.
spreadsheet that you showed earlier.
Yeah. It
It was
doesn't,
after the veterans
it
tax
gets
credit
added
is
in at the time of tax
outside
rate
of it.
setting.
It does
so
not.
it's
It would
not
not
subject
impact
to
the
the
tax
tax
cap.
cap.
No, I don't think it would be, no.
Really? 'Cause
It's
I thought
just,
last time
I think
did.
it was just for informational when we did it this year. Let me
Because
see
it
what
act-
his warrant article had said.
Because
Yeah,
there's,
but how could it,
how could it? 'Cause
how could it not?
I know,
I
did the
think
budget
I
committee
don't
vote on
know.
the
in the
original
last
tax
time,
credit?
the last time they
did.
got raised, there was a
Okay.
significant
Okay.
tax impact. There will be a tax impact.
We did vote on it, yeah.
Because what it does
Both
is it
times, yeah.
raises the tax rate and
Yeah.
then distributes the credit.
Well, how did we approve it?
Although,
last
was it 2023?
Cause when they raised it to
When do they have to
$7.50,
bring
we
in
based it off of current
I think by,
recipients.
still by
I'm saying
April
It doesn't affect the
15,
tax caps, the
yeah.
tax caps.
So it's still
calculated off of
2023.
The revenues needed, and then this number is removed.
But what, the way it works is we raise the money for
But
the
they-
tax cap credit, and then it gets
Let me see
distributed, so
what
you
this-
need to
'cause
raise
this-
the revenue
But
to
if they
cover the
have to
credit
come
provide.
by April,
Yeah, no, it's still 2023, but this was
Still gonna
a
be more than $1.
petition.
yeah,
So in 2022's, it was by petition to see if the town will vote to increase the veterans' tax credit and all vets' tax credit from 500 to 750. And then it was just note, assuming the same number of eligible recipients, but it was only recommended by the board.
Not
And-
not the budget.
Yeah,
But
let me
it
see if there
was-
was a final.
We voted.
So
It was
not-
just-
that was a
I think we
petition,
said-
it wasn't
it
done
was a
at warrant?
petition,
Okay.
yeah.
It's,
It was a petition.
Wasn't a
done at
petition.
That was the
warrant.
original one.
oh, the original one.
Yeah,
Okay.
because it was a petition, but let me,
I'm gonna make
I
a
feel like there was
suggestion
one we did.
Huh.
that, in the interest
they
of
were all
time,
petition.
I doubt very much that you're gonna see a large, or practically any, it's gonna pass in March. The deadline's right
don't-
around the
yeah.
corner, and these people are on active duty, they've gotta
Oh.
physically come in and show us their
Oh,
payroll.
they have to do that by April 1.
yeah, but just because you're active duty doesn't
yeah.
mean you're
April,
deployed.
April
Yeah.
15th.
You could be at Hanscom, you could be
In
at
order
Portsmouth.
to get it
They have
for
30 days,
twenty twenty-three. Now, you might have others that come in all year long,
You have to-
or an impact 2024,
All
but
it takes is.
You have to be a year resident of New Hampshire as
So
well.
can we get clarification on
Whether we have to
but
vote.
two questions? One, do we need to vote on this?
okay.
And two, if we do need to vote on this, does it impact the tax cap based on where it sets in that spreadsheet that you showed?
I don't think it does, and I think
And-
when it
And
goes
if we
into
can get
your-
clarification on those two items, then we can either vote on this at the hearing, or we can vote after
I feel like we had this
deliberative.
discussion with Troy, and the answer was because you raise the money and then distribute it, it did impact the taxes.
Cause I think when I put it in, CRA's portal, I think it's non-monetary.
Let's get clarification.
Oh,
on that if-
yeah.
Yeah.
Laura gave me the, wording,
Yep.
which is much better than the wording we had locally, so I'll reach back out to her
So,
and say, what are other budget, cause everyone's having to do this.
right.
What are other budget committees that
Perfect.
are?
So we've gone through all the town articles. We potentially might have to come back to 15 next week and revisit that. And you know, in full transparency, they're
I can actually send you the email that we got from legal for Troy.
Oh, awesome.
perfect. Thank you. We can always come back and revisit any of these warrant articles as we've done in the past at deliberative if we have to
Do
or
we
want
need
to.
to revisit Article 1, since we've changed the budget?
Yes, we do. That's a very good catch.
Oh,
Do you have,
yeah.
do you have
Good
a
thinking.
new number for that that we
I
can
do, but.
vote on right now?
You can ask about putting that back in.
7713 less
So
our
just so,
cuts.
this was an email that was sent
Yeah,
in
Article 4.
2020 when we did this. The answer was that yes, it does affect the tax cap.
Oh, really?
So it is, I understand for some reason the veterans tax credit is used in calculating tax cap. And, so I will send along
Thank you.
this.
So,
Was that from Troy or was that from legal?
Troy forwarded legal response.
Laura, was that Laura?
I have,
Same legal?
this was legal's response regarding, she didn't say
Okay.
who, he didn't say who.
That was the original one, right?
When it went probably from 300 to 500,
No, when it went to 300, or whatever the first one was.
3 to 5, and then it went to 750 a cut this year.
Thank you. So our, Ms. Kleiner, Ms. White, please correct me if I'm wrong. Our new total is 7673829.
Minus the 45, right?
Say that
To
again.
do
Sorry.
those two.
You said minus, yeah.
So now we're under the cap by 45,601, so
Yes.
7673829,
Yeah, 776.
is that right?
Yep.
7673829.
However, it did say that recommendation is optional because it falls outside the character of a special warrant article. So it affects the tax cap, but you may not have to vote on it.
I think, because
Yeah,
it only
we'll
comes
let
up in
Laura
the
take a look over that,
calculation
and
the
if she
next
agrees with
year.
it, then
So
perfect.
we may be screwing ourselves, but sure. You don't have to vote.
All right, so we're gonna revote on Article 4 operating budget just because the number changed. So I'll reread this quickly. Article 4 operating budget. Shall the town vote to raise and appropriate as an operating budget, not including appropriations by special warrant articles and other appropriations voted separately, the amount set forth in the budget posted with the warrant or as amended by the vote of the first session for the purposes set forth therein, totaling $7,673,829. Should this article be defeated, the default budget shall be $7,776,778, which is the same as last year with certain adjustments required by previous action of the town of Litchfield or by law, where the governing body may hold one special meeting in accordance with RSA 4013, 10, and 16 to take up the issue of a revised operating budget only, estimated tax rate impact 14 cents. Recommended by the Budget Committee 500. I'm sorry, Board of Selectmen 500.
Motion to recommend Article 4.
I have a motion
You'll
by.
be less than 14 cents.
Yeah, I was just thinking that the tax rate impact will probably go down slightly.
Selectmen will have to reload on
You're
that,
right,
too.
yes,
Yeah.
you're right.
Which one are we talking about?
So I had a motion
You're
by
Oh, that's right, because they changed.
motion by Mr. Bork to have a second.
Yes.
Second by, I'll give this one to Ms. Stevens. All right, roll call vote. Ms. Hirschberger,
Yes.
Mr. Leary,
No,
sorry. Ms. Douglas,
Yes.
I'm a yes. Ms. Stevens,
Yes.
Mr. Barca,
It's getting late, I know.
Mr. Bork, I was waiting. And Mr. Hayes,
Yes.
and that will carry 710, recommended by the Budget Committee. All right. Good thing we don't have a 9:30 stop tonight. We
That's a-
thank you, ladies.
Thank you.
We're gonna switch gears to the town.
so school.
To the school.
Sorry, to the school. It is.
Sure you don't want to do that again.
It is late. All right. We have 5 warrant articles on the school side. And we will let Mr. Taunton and Dr. Jetty come in. I believe they're waiting in the lobby. We'll do a transition here.
Mr. Sun, while they're
Yes, sir.
transitioning in,
Yes,
why
sir.
was the vote 710?
Mr. Taylor was out of the room.
So 701.
Thank you.
He said 710. Is it?
Yeah,
or
no,
is 701?
710, yeah. Yes. We voted on
Got
the
it.
new operating budget because we reduced, so. Good evening. Thanks for hanging around for a while.
A later night, huh?
Yeah. All right. So we'll go through the same process. You should have a link from, I believe Ms. Hirschberger sent it. If not, I'm gonna resend it to everybody right here so that it's at the top of your email.
Scavenger hunt, remember?
2020. Let's see here. School warrants. I'll send an email that has this at the top of your email.
Yeah, you have to go into the email.
So we'll go through the same process. I'll read each of the 5 articles that we have here, and then we'll entertain motions to recommend or not recommend, and have discussion, and allow Dr. Jetty or Mr. Taunton to answer any questions or provide any additional information. Okay. I think everybody's here. All right. Let's start with, on the school side, Article 1. Shall the Litchfield School District vote to raise and appropriate as an operating budget, not including appropriations by special warrant articles and other appropriations voted separately, the amount set forth on the budget posted with the warrant or as amended by the vote at the first session of the annual school district meeting for the purposes set forth herein, totaling $26,315,094. Should this article be defeated, the default budget shall be $25,180,465, which is the same as last year, with certain adjustments required by previous action of the Litchfield School District or by law, or the school board may hold one special meeting in accordance with RSA 4013, 10, and 16 to take up the issue of a revised operating budget only. Estimated tax impact is, for the operating budget, is $1.30, and for the default budget is 65 cents. Do I have a motion to recommend?
Motion to recommend Article 1.
I have a motion by Mr. Bork. Do I have a second?
I was hoping we could make adjustments to it, so, okay.
I'll second.
Second by Ms. Stevens. Discussion.
Well, we still have, I believe, $50,000 in the health insurance to offset stuff, right? Added insurance premiums. We have 2 severance packages that are funded this year and next year. I don't think we've actually settled on a number for the recommended budget. There were still outstanding questions that we were talking about.
Can you go back to your items you mentioned? You mentioned the $50,000.
There was, in one of the reports from the school, I believe they added $50,000 to health insurance or somewhere to cover changes in health insurance elections, correct?
That's correct.
And we voted on that on December 1st, and it failed 4-5-0.
Right,
to
because
remove
there
that.
was a discussion about a warrant article that
Correct.
has been put forward.
Correct.
So given that the school is bringing forward a warrant article, I would remake the motion to remove the $50,000 because we're including it in the budget and we're asking for additional funding for the same purpose.
I'll second.
A motion to remove. Sorry, give me just 1 second. A motion to remove district-wide benefits, which is 29 account 211. Elected pool remove $50,000. So I had a motion by
So-
Ms. Douglas, had a second by Mr. Taylor. Discussion.
That would be that you're referring to the Employee Benefits Capital Reserve Fund, is that correct?
This is a new line item, so wherever you stuck it, I'm trying to pull it back out. This is something that we have been able to absorb within our budget on an annual basis with the discussion that a warrant article might be warranted, the English to me is, that might be necessary. There is one being proposed. So not only is there a warrant article to fund this purpose, there's money in the budget to fund it. So I'm saying one or the other. So I would say
So the-
withdraw this money from the
The
proposed budget.
challenge is, this is the 5th article. And if there's not enough money in year-end funds, which there's likely not going to be enough, which is why we ended up putting percentages in 3 of the articles, and this only has 10%.
So
So
philosophically,
it may not even.
that's fine. We've absorbed this. People make changes in their health insurance every year, and every year we've been able to absorb it, whether it's because of attrition, funded positions that aren't filled. There are savings within the budget that have been able to cover this. We just talked about how tight it was on the town side and difficult decisions we had to make there. This is a new line item for something that we've already been able to absorb. I just don't think it's necessary.
Additional discussion. Okay. I will take a roll call vote. Ms. Hirschberger,
No.
Mr. Leary,
Yes.
Ms. Douglas.
Yes.
I am a yes. Ms. Stevens,
No.
Mr. Taylor,
Yes.
Mr. Barca,
Yes.
Mr. Bork,
No.
and Mr. Hayes.
Yes.
Motion carries 6-3-0. Back to our original motion, which is now amended. Let me do some math. So the new operating budget, I'm not gonna reread the whole article. The new operating budget amount would be $26,265,094.
So then the other question I have is regarding the
Katie,
default
just
budget.
a point of clarification.
Yep, go ahead.
Which line and which page, where was that cut from?
It's
It-
towards the,
I can give you the org code. It was 10000290000 account 211 district-wide benefits. I'm looking on Doug's information for budget committee sheet was where I found because I knew we had voted on it in the
Yes,
past,
I
so that's why I went there.
Gotta be.
And has the default budget information been updated based on the feedback? I believe there was a discussion about utilities being level funded versus.
Yeah,
so,
Mr. Taunton, go ahead.
Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah, so there have been adjustments made to the default budget throughout our discussions. Today, we made some more reductions mainly to the default budget, and
Okay.
some of them had to do with the energy. We did not zero out the energy. There is a difference in opinion between both the attorneys, our attorney and the town attorney. The difference of opinion kind of goes with the fact with that a town doesn't necessarily have to be open at all, where a school by mandate has to be open 180 days. So, and it has to provide heating, ventilation, and electricity during that time. So we look to reduce it. We reduced the increase by 20%. So what we did was we took 104 weekends, weekend days, 11 holidays that people aren't there, and then we subtracted that amount from the 180 days. So that's the amount of overage that people are there, and that's 20%, of the year. So we reduced it by 20% to only focus on those 180 days.
Can I get a copy of the legal finding? Because I disagree. I actually agree with the town's lawyer, so I'm curious as to what the legal foundation and basis is for the school's decision. I think your lawyer's incorrect, so I'd be curious as to what they used as a foundation for that decision.
Sure, he just told you what he used.
Which RSA?
There,
So
it's in
ours,
our
it's
email.
in the notes,
Yeah.
so.
Yeah,
And-
so you, I
So it's
I disagree with the
RSA.
interpretation, so.
Do I get to
189.
talk, or you're just saying keep cutting me off?
Go ahead. Go ahead.
So, what I'm trying to say here is that he cited the RSA's relative to, there are laws that say we have to have in-person school 180 days. There are laws that say that we have to provide heating and ventilation, and we have to provide lighting that meets the standards. And those are the legal requirements that we have. Those are not requirements that are on the town or municipal side. I can't just shut the schools and send students home. We saw what happened during the pandemic when we had to do that, right? But a town could do it. A town could reduce the number of hours that the office is open. A town could say people can work remotely and not have heating or lighting available. So that's what the attorney is citing. He's saying you have all these legal requirements that you need to meet. And again, Doug is citing where the notes are there.
No, I've seen the RSA, and like I said, I don't agree with the interpretation, which is why I looked for the RSAs to see how do they define a school default budget? What things are you allowed to carry, assuming there could be differences? There isn't. I didn't see anything specific that said Town does it this way, school does it this way. So to me, the RSA is the RSA, therefore it applies equally, which is why I don't, so I was curious to
So
see,
it's part
maybe
of-
there was an education rule that I was unaware of that that had an impact. But if you were using the RSA that the town is relying on, then I understand why you are where you are. I just wholeheartedly disagree with it.
So where we're coming from is a part of the default budget that says obligations mandated by law. So mandated to us. So mandated to us is 180 days, mandated to us is that proper ventilation, heating, and lighting.
All right.
So that's where we're using.
No, I understand that, and I had read some, the NHMA saying, yes, salt changes, electricity changes, units change, but you don't get, you budget the same amount, not the same quantity. That's why I understand where the town's coming from, and why I don't agree with the school, but at least I understand why you are doing what you're doing, even though I don't agree with it.
So one follow-up question on that, Mr. Totten.
Yep.
Is there anything in there that has, okay, I understand you have the 180 days mandated. Is there anything, though, that states in terms of how much you can increase any of those mandatory services from the prior year to the default budget year? Like, in other words, if you say, look, I have to have electricity, is there some sort of guidance that says, yes, you can increase that because you need to be open, however, it cannot exceed X? Or could you just turn around and say, I think it's going to be a 30% increase, so therefore I can increase that line item by 30% in the default budget? Is there any regulator there?
There is no set numbers that say increase by this amount or that amount. So I used the prices that we have for that year to increase it. So I went off those hard numbers that we have. In some years, it's going up, which is what we're experiencing. I think it's gonna be great when we can have the default budget go down, because the prices of energy have gone down. So now the taxpayers get to funnel more of their money that's just going towards students, towards that learning part. But we're just not there this year. So another year, that would be great when we get there. And then at that point, the default budget would go down by that amount.
Okay, thank you.
Additional discussion for Article 1.
So is that also the same, so when we talk about special ed, things, obviously, my continued discussion is, even though we budget for it, we don't always spend it. And I told you last time, I think running the numbers was, we spend about 80 to 85% of what's budgeted. So when we see daily transportation, special ed, based on contract note 2, which is assuming the mandated needs, but we don't, that's not necessarily gonna be what the number is. So I struggle when we carry forward these numbers based on a word in the law, even though that's not gonna be that's not the actual need anyway. So I have a lot of trouble with this default. I mean, I've only been able to look at it for 12 hours. So I haven't really gotten to fully digest it, but I don't think it's correct. And I struggle with it because I don't think it's correct.
So we can vote on it tonight. We would still have an opportunity to re-vote on Article 1 after the budget hearing, or after school deliberative on February 11th, if we so choose.
Right. Well, the reality is the default budget, even though I don't think it's correct, I think is a more appropriate number. So I would be voting against the school budget anyway, in favor of the default budget. But I'm not convinced that the default budget's correct to begin with. So.
Any other discussion on Article 1?
Can I ask why the tax impact is double for the operating budget versus the default budget?
Yep, that's definitely a good question. So the operating budget has in it, it starts, the default budget is lower than the operating budget by several $100,000. But then the operating budget in it has the gap that happens next year to finish the capital project at the middle school, as well as do some pre-bond work at the elementary school. Now that pre-bond work would be reimbursed, so the overall appropriations are high, but that pre-bond work would be reimbursed through the expendable trust. And some of the work that would be happening at the middle school would be reimbursed. Well, we have the revenue from the municipal lease, but we don't have enough municipal lease to cover all of the work left at the middle school. So the operating budget, which includes the general fund, food service, special revenue or grants, as well as the capital projects. The capital projects, it's in the operating budget, but it's not in the default budget.
Those projects are not in the default budget,
They're
which
not-
is why the impact is essentially half.
Yeah, now, the operating budget has a little bit more, well, decent amount more revenue than the default budget.
Right.
Because it has 40,000, again, we're putting in 40,000 for pre-bond work at the elementary school, but that's coming off with capital improvement expendable trust, 40,000, as well as we're expecting there to be $304,811 left in the municipal lease to use towards the North Branch construction. So those would go into the operating budget, but they wouldn't go in the default budget, because those costs aren't going in the default budget.
If I'm a taxpayer and I'm in the voting booth and I'm looking at this, I mean, it's a no-brainer to vote no.
Yep, we gotta start with giving you the numbers of where they lie, so.
So as a follow-up to that, if Article 1 is voted down and the default is the budget, well,
No, you have to keep going until you get a budget you support. We can't not put forward a budget.
No. I'm not talking about us. I'm
Oh.
talking about in March. Yeah. What would that do for those projects that you're talking about?
So, those are questions.
Because of
that
specifically, I guess let me rephrase my question. Specifically, those revenues that you're talking about, what impact would that have, if any? Because you talked about those revenues are not in the default budget.
So the revenues that aren't in the default budget are the capital improvement expendable trust fund, using the 40,000 from there. So that would just stay in the trust fund.
Got it.
As well as a municipal lease. That becomes a little bit trickier because, there is work to be completed at the middle school. So, that would be further talk with our attorney. There is no guarantee on this, but, what information we're getting is that we might fall into some reimbursement from the Inflation Reduction Act. So that would be additional revenue. But again, we got to figure out how that would all tie in. So I think, great question. We're starting to kind of process that through, but we haven't got final answers on that.
Thank you.
So the school board has not seen this before, the estimated tax impact either, so.
Yeah, I had asked Mr. Totten to add this prior to, I was looking over everything earlier today. Ms. Douglas had emailed some questions, and I had asked Mr. Totten if he could have that in there for our meeting tonight, because I felt it was important for people to see, so I appreciate you doing that.
Yeah, some things have taken a little bit longer as we've gone back and forth with our attorneys to make sure that the number we're putting forward makes sense, so, and is appropriate.
That's gonna require a lot of description. I mean, I feel the same way as you do, honestly. I mean, look, it's double. Even if we have the same default end budget, just by the calculation that's required, the default budget, it's gonna come in
Yeah, the impact is double.
as a much smaller tax impact.
Even if you look at the bottom line, it's, $1 million plus. That's what people are going to look at. I feel like that's the first place their eyes are going to draw to is $1 million.
I think we should talk through those numbers a little bit too, because you take the North Branch contract, we have an agreement to finish the project. There will be kitchen equipment that we will have purchased sitting in a trailer. And if the default budget is put in place, the money is not there to pay the laborers to install any of it. And so then we're sitting on all this equipment. And the only way for us to pay for that, and this would be a question for the board. The board's gonna have to ultimately make a decision on it. Do you cut something else substantially to finish that project up? Because
Totally
that
confused.
would be the only way to close that kind of a gap.
That was an approved lease, so
If
like.
it's approved by the voters,
So
it's
this
a
is why
contract,
I-
why is it not in there?
So here's the thing. What was approved by the voters was the funding source, but it wasn't the full funding source. It was the municipal lease, which funded a portion of it, and then the rest of it was coming from long-term energy savings. And we were expecting to get the project completely done this year. Now it's trickled because of all the supply chain things. I mean, I think kitchen equipment's arriving in April at this point, not what any of us saw when we were voting a year ago. And so that's not gonna be done until June and July is when the kitchen renovation will actually occur. So the contract with North Branch was never voted on by the taxpayers, right? You voted on the funding source to accomplish a contract, but you didn't actually vote on the contract. So we can't, because the contract wasn't voted on, we can't put that into the default calculation. If I'm explaining it incorrectly, correct?
No, that's correct. It's, so the difference would be, to show the opposite of that, is that the teacher's contract and the support staff contract was put to the voters, and the voters voted on it, knowing that there would be an impact that year, but in subsequent years as well. Because the voters voted on that and agreed to that, that's why you're seeing increases in salary and benefits in the default budget for union staff. The North Branch contract was known, but it wasn't voted on by the voters.
Which is part of the reason that a lot of us advocated for a bond when this came forward last year. And the other thing I noticed on here is I don't see a school board recommendation. Did you guys vote on this?
Not on any of them individually. We voted to the wording, I gave it to you, to send the whole warrant, all of the warrants over to the budget committee.
I
yes.
did not.
So there were 3 that we were waiting on legal approval from, and when we saw it last night, the numbers weren't plugged in here.
So I had this conversation with Ms. Hirschberger today because I had asked for the numbers to be put in there, the estimated tax impacts. And I also said, can you please include the recommended school board vote? I did not watch all of the 4-hour marathon from the other night. I stopped. I just assumed that you all had and didn't watch it and look at it. And that's when Ms. Hirschberger shared, it was 5, 6 o'clock today, that they voted in whole 5-0-0 to send the warrant articles as written at that time. And they had not taken individual action on them at that point.
So the wording was send the
We can
draft
still
warrant.
vote on them.
We voted to send.
Well,
We voted to send the draft warrant articles as reported this evening, January 4th, to the budget committee for presentation on January 5th.
we can vote on it without them having voted on it. I don't think that's illegal.
No, it's not illegal, but we also don't have to vote on it.
That is a true statement as well. We do
Have
still have, we have a
to vote on
motion.
this one?
We do have,
Yeah.
we do still have a motion.
Oh, yeah, no, we do.
We have a motion and a second. Yes, we do, because we diverted, we made the cut. The number the new number for Article 1 is $26,265,094 for the operating budget. So we have a motion and a second. Any additional discussion?
I still think it's high, so I don't know.
Should we hold off? I think we should hold off on voting if the school board hasn't voted.
We're
I don't think the
separate
school board vote
entities.
is gonna influence
Yeah, I mean,
it.
I don't know that I don't know that how they vote on any of these changes how we vote on any of these. I mean, that's my opinion, right?
They could vote
I'm just thinking,
5,
like,
whatever,
well,
5-0-0, I'm still a no.
They
So-
agreed to send.
It doesn't change how I don't. In my purview, more than likely they're all going to support these. I don't think that seeing that 5-0-0 or 4-1-0, however it plays out, is going to change our conversations, discussions, and how we vote.
No, I was more thinking if they just made a change to it, but that's
If
okay.
they make a change to it, then we would have to vote at deliberative or
From that perspective, we saved them, right? Because we already made a change, and you have to re-vote it anyway.
correct. They would have had to revote Article 1, yes, already.
Can we call the vote?
Call a vote. All right. So this is to recommend that new amount that I mentioned of $26,265,094. Ms. Hirschberger,
Yes.
Mr. Leary,
No.
Ms. Douglas.
No.
I am a yes. Ms. Stevens,
Yes.
Mr. Taylor,
No.
Mr. Barca,
Yes.
Mr. Bork,
Yes.
and Mr. Hayes.
No.
Motion carries 5-4-0, recommended by the Budget Committee. Article 2, shall the Litchfield School District raise and appropriate the sum of $497,000 for the purpose of approximately 35 acres of land with no buildings or improvements thereon, shown as tax map 15, lot number 8 on Litchfield tax maps. The parcel is also known as BL 114 Albuquerque Avenue, Litchfield, New Hampshire, and further approve the seller's condition of the sale, which is that the district will name the school to be constructed thereon the Robin Riley Elementary School. This warrant article will be a special non-lapsing appropriation per RSA 3276 and will not lapse until the closing on the property takes place once the construction of a new school is funded and approved by voters or before June 30th, 2029, whichever is sooner. The estimated tax impact is 41 cents.
I'll make a motion to recommend Article 2.
Motion by Mr. Bork, second by Mr. Taylor. Discussion.
Super quick question, I promise. So when it says lapse, that means the school district would not have to write the check for $497,000 until there is an approved warrant article for a school to be built on that land.
That is correct.
Say, can you repeat that again, please, and say
Yes.
that one more time?
That the school district will not have to pay the $497,000 until the town also approves a warrant article to build a school with this name on that piece of land. So in other words,
Got it. Thank you.
the clarification I'm trying to make is that with the current fiscal climate, as far as the school district is concerned, it's not that you're gonna, as soon as this is done, you are not writing a check for $497,000, meanwhile also trying to replenish the funds that needed to be tapped into. That
Yeah, my
497
understanding
won't
is
be
that-
paid until a future date
Yeah.
that a warrant article is approved.
I think my understanding is cannot be paid.
Cannot.
Cannot be paid. Is that correct? Cannot be paid until
Correct.
it is.
So our intent is to raise and appropriate the money.
So it is raised and appropriate, though.
It is
goes in an
appropriate.
account,
The
sits
money
there.
would
We'll
sit there.
hold it in an account.
Yep.
Our intent is to come back the next year with the bond vote, and if it's successful, we'll go to closing. If it's not successful, we will extend our negotiations and try to go to closing when we get a successful bond vote. This gives us actually,
6 years.
well, yeah, it's 5 years from the end of the fiscal year that it's approved in.
Didn't the
So
purchase and sale say 2 years, I thought?
It did, but everything's negotiable. The land's been sitting there for a million years, so I think, we would have an opportunity to re-engage with the seller. It's pretty clear that the seller's intent is to build a school in honor of their daughter, and if the public is showing good faith effort to do that, if building aid from the state is making some progress and good faith effort is coming there, and we can get everything pulled together, I'm pretty confident the seller would be open to extending that term.
Okay, so I do now have a follow-up question, and you guys are gonna kill me, especially Derek. So I guess now what I'm hearing, though, is it's a raise and appropriate. Does that mean if this passes at the end of this fiscal year, would you have to take $497,000 and put it aside in an account?
It would, yes, we would
Yes.
raise that.
Okay,
and
so
set
you would have to do that.
Yep.
And you would also have to try to replenish the construction fund and the rainy day fund.
The
So-
497 isn't an addition.
It's new
not with
taxation.
end of year. It's
new taxation.
New taxation.
It's not coming from the fund balance.
So, yeah.
Okay,
That's why there's a tax impact.
Right.
Yeah.
gotcha.
Additional discussion.
So, I have spent the past couple of weeks really trying to order my thoughts on this, because I think the land is an amazing location, and I think it's great that this has come up. My problem with this is that I firmly believe we should be looking at a consolidation project. I think we should be looking, and this is one of the reasons why it kills me that we did not wait a year on LMS. Because we could have built a beautiful pre-K to 6th grade building on the site. We could have put 7th and 8th grade at CHS. And with the savings we would have achieved between utilities, because let's face it, GMS and LMS both leak like sieves. The energy savings, the maintenance savings, and all the other savings we could have achieved could have put this building up there for minimal impact to the taxpayers. But now we've invested on what? Over the course of several years, $10 million, $9 million into LMS. So if I firmly believe in a consolidation project, which I do, then I either have to support building a building over in this beautiful site, which I think is great, with the understanding we just write off LMS, that investment, or we consolidate at LMS knowing that we're spending additional several $1 million in site work.
It's not to say consolidation couldn't still happen.
But where though? If we consolidate at this site, we write off the investment at LMS.
That would be the case, yes.
So to me, this is an indication why it is so important.
Instead of a $40 million school, you're gonna build a $60 million school.
But I would have saved. Look at how much you have in energy. Would it be the amount of savings alone on energy between GMS, LMS, and maintenance would have covered a good chunk of the cost of that building. I could have been convinced to do a high efficiency building over there, knowing it would have, by decommissioning 2 buildings, we could have done it for almost minimal impact. But
At the same time, if the voters had voted for the school 20 years ago, it ought to be paid
well,
for
but that's
when
not the
it's
choice.
built.
Here we are saying we had a project landed in our laps at the 11th hour last year, and some of us said, can we take a year to really think if this is the project we should be moving forward with? And now looking at this, I'm glad that people are happy with LMS. I think it was the wrong project at the wrong time. And now the problem is, do we consolidate here, writing off LMS, or consolidate at LMS with, not that people, it's not a nice site, this site is much more conducive to our needs.
Well, Kiri, that argument will come next year when they put up a bond for a new school. Right now, it's buying property.
Which is the segue to the bond. It just makes me, this is why I really wish the school would open up your committees to people with the experience in construction, with the experience in building, with the experience in curriculums. We are not doing our neighbors any justice by shutting out people into these things, because this is a lost opportunity and it makes me sad.
Well, I think the land is a great opportunity.
It is, but not. But I don't want to vote in favor of it with the idea that, well, by voting yes, I'm voting in favor of a school, because I don't.
I don't think those two are mutually
It's
exclusive
just one
at this
thing,
point.
it's just the land.
I think
right
you're
now.
looking. I think you've said it. You said it well. The land is a great investment at a great price, and that's what we're looking at right now. I think the majority of what you just shared.
What happens if the bond doesn't go through?
What happens to that $497,000
What happens
that's
to the
raised and
land?
appropriated?
What happens to it?
Well,
Let the conservation committee buy it. I don't know. What's the deal? Because I agree that it's an excellent plot of land. I would hate to
it
see
would go
it
back to the owner.
developed.
It would go back to the owner.
That
But
would
I
go
know-
back to them.
It would go back
To
to,
the
yeah.
497.
Yeah, what happens to the 497? To me, this is why we need
Go back.
That would go back,
long-term planning.
the 497, if nothing happened, would go back to the taxpayers.
I wish this project was the one that came forward first, because to me, I've been anti-building a new school since I moved to town, but I could have been convinced to build a building over there if it meant consolidating out of those 2 buildings. It makes me sad.
Terry, I wish you would engage with us during the community outreach sessions.
I
because
have been engaged in
We
these.
had multiple sessions where we invited the public in. We explored options, including reconfiguring. We priced out what it would cost to add a 7th and 8th grade wing on the high school. We costed out what it would take to convert the middle school into a PK6 building. I mean, all of these options were considered, shared with the public, but ultimately the feedback the board got and why they selected to go with the current configuration is people like the current configuration. There were concerns that were raised when we talked about bringing 8th graders temporarily up to the high school.
That is a completely different situation, because
And-
you were going to bust them back and
Let
forth.
him finish, please.
The point being that those concerns were very similar to what we heard when we were talking about bringing 7th and 8th graders up to the high school. So, the board did explore consolidation options like you're discussing, and ultimately, at the end of it, and based on the feedback that we got, the configuration was to build a new PK4 school on a new site. That was the decision that was made after a very lengthy and community-involved process.
Any additional new discussion?
Is there a reason why? Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Mr. Hayes.
Yeah, well, my question is, 35 acres for, $500,000 looks like a great deal. But if we're looking at only 8 buildable acres, the rest is, either wet or sloping, is this a real good investment that's going to be able to support a new school? We don't even know that. 700 feet wide by, I think, 2,600 feet deep, according to the appraisal. But only the front of the property is buildable. So we don't know if it's gonna be able to support a school design.
We do know that. Our architect, in fact, we're doing a presentation to our Facility Needs Committee on Wednesday. The architect has taken the plan that was developed earlier for another piece of property. And if you remember, we said that we're going to invest into getting that done because we thought we were going to be able to settle on that property. It didn't come through. And I was very clear with the board. I said, if it doesn't come through, what we're going to do is pick that plan up and relocate it to the piece of property. The architect's now done that work. So we have a preliminary conceptual diagram of taking the school that is under development, relocating it to this piece of property, and there is adequate space to build that school, to build the required parking, to build a play field, and to build a playground. And also to give proper buffers for the neighbors on Westview and proper buffers from Albuquerque so that we're able to get it all in there. So in fact, we can do it all, and we have a sketch and a plan, and we'll be presenting that next Wednesday.
In my assumption, the slope is no different than it is on Westview, and there's like 14 houses on Westview. You can build on the slope.
Well, and actually, the school that was under development was on another sloped piece of property. It was sort of a two-story building. One part is sort of one story, and then the other part is two stories. So it's not fully a two-story building, but it's built into and integrated in. And the other thing is, all the solar aspects to get this to be a net zero building are perfect on that property site. I mean, it's absolutely ideal for the project requirements that have been developed.
Mr. Hayes, did that answer your question?
Yes, it does. I mean, I certainly am still interested in a site visit, take a walk on the property, and also still would like to see the tax card to see what the percentage of wet sloping and so forth is, because I don't believe that you can build or expand on wetlands or slope, not for a school.
Yeah. And you had requested that tax card previously, and I know Dr. Jetty has that on his list, right?
The link is there. It's been there. So it's in the document.
It's in which?
Well, I know the appraisal is there, but I didn't see a tax card. It comes from the town.
Mr. Taylor, did you have a follow-up?
Yeah, is there a
question?
reason why in this particular warrant article there is not specific wording on the exit language, that if it is not, then the money is returned to the taxpayers? The reason why I bring this up is that there was obviously some public input during the hearing about, this was for GMS project, and now you're using an LMS project, and then legally it was looked at and approved that yes, it was okay to do that as a means to be able to continue to rebuild that trust. Was there a legal reason why? And if there wasn't, then fine, I can go ahead and bring that language to deliberative, but I don't want to bring it up at deliberative if you've already gone over this with your lawyer.
Ask me the question again, because I'm not
I want to know why Mr. Tottenham said that, if this doesn't happen, then this fund of $497 would then be returned to the taxpayers.
So I think
why is that not written in the article?
It is when it says that it's non-lapsing until that date. So the point is that on that date, it then lapses, which means the funds have been raised and appropriated, been held, they probably earned interest in the meantime, and they then would be revenue that would have been previously collected, not necessary to raise again toward that next budget. So it would sort of be a credit at that stage. That's the way I understand it.
Right, yeah, I mean, we can check with our attorney about putting that language, adding that in there.
To the
too,
voter.
because that's
Just
our
so that it's
understanding
very
of
clear
what
that
it's
it
gonna
can't
be.
just be absorbed by the school district to go use for something
I think if
else.
that's in the voter's guide, that's a good place
And I
for it.
think when the attorney writes these, he wrote that language, they are sort of bound by the way DRA requires these things to be written. So sometimes, the language can somewhat be archaic, and I think there are way cleaner ways to write all of these things, but we're stuck with history and tradition of the way they get worded. So in Gordon's mind, it does exactly what you're saying it does. But
You will have legal representation at the
will.
deliberative session,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, and I
Okay.
think we can-
So if I bring it up, then legal can jump in and say that's illegal.
We'll bring it
I
up.
think we'll bring it up before you bring it up then, so.
All right, anything else any additional discussion on Article 2? All right, call to vote. The original motion was to recommend Article 2. Ms. Hirschberger,
Yes.
Mr. Leary,
No.
Ms. Douglas?
No.
I am a yes. Ms. Stevens?
Yes.
Mr. Taylor?
Yes.
Mr. Barca?
Yes.
Mr. Bork?
Yes.
And Mr. Hayes?
No.
Motion carries, the motion to recommend by the Budget Committee passes 6-3-0. All right, Article 3. Shall the Litchfield School District vote to raise and appropriate 50% of the fund balance up to a sum of $125,000 to be added to the Building Maintenance Capital Reserve Fund established in 2005 for the purpose of funding school capital improvements, building maintenance and repairs in the Litchfield School District, with said funds to come from the June 30 unassigned fund balance available for transfer on July 1 of this year with no additional amount to be raised from taxation. Estimated tax impact is $0.
The motion to recommend Article 3.
Second.
Mr. Bork, second by Mr. Taylor. Discussion?
If I could just point out to the Budget Committee, so the last time you saw this, this was
4.
Article 4.
Yeah.
And the current Article 4 was Article 3. The board selected to reverse the order because they do get funded in the order that they appear on the warrant. Although with the percentages, unless you're only doing 50% of what's there. So the order's not going to make as much difference in this case. But I think the signal they're making is that putting the money into building maintenance is their highest priority. And they wanted that to be the first one that was encountered by the voters because that's the rainy day fund. That's the one that if you want to replace or replenish one, that's the highest priority to do.
And I actually agree with you on that statement, but I would like to see the fund actually be designated for a maintenance fund. Currently, the way it's worded, should we find ourselves in a shortfall on another building project, our maintenance fund can be tapped into. So I don't like the wording on the current fund, so I will be voting no, because this is gonna be a building maintenance fund, it should be building maintenance fund.
That's not on the article itself, though.
Nope.
That's on the fund itself.
Right, so to me, I think this fund should be retired and replaced with a maintenance fund designated for the sole purpose of maintenance, so it doesn't get used for other purposes. Because every time we've put money into this in the past several years, we've referenced boilers, we've referenced air handling units. We never referenced a building project. So to me, if this is gonna be a maintenance fund, it should be a maintenance fund. And so to me, I'd retire this one and replace it with a fund designated for the sole purpose of funding maintenance.
If I may just respond to that, I would remind everybody that the money was used to replace air handlers, the things that Ms. Douglas just cited that she would like to see. That's what we were doing. We were maintaining a 40-year-old building that had failed heating and ventilation throughout the building.
Which you had a lease
And
for.
so,
You had a project for it, so.
but the point of dancing around that it wasn't used appropriately, I think is incorrect. Because in fact, the money that was withdrawn went to building maintenance items that had been not addressed for a number of years. And we got it done. We got the project completed, or will have it completed.
So, yes, they were used for maintenance, but it's not like we didn't just approve $7 or more million for that very purpose. The reason we used this for air handlers is because we went over budget. It's not because no. So we're gonna have to agree to disagree on this. I would like to see this for like, if a Campbell boiler goes down, a GMS hot water heater, not because we didn't properly budget for a capital improvement project.
Additional discussion on Article 3.
I do seem to remember Mr. Cutter talking at the hearing, at the school board meeting about if a septic blows or if a roof goes bad on one of the schools, we don't have the money to fix it at this point by tapping into this to take care of that deficit. So yeah, I would agree with Mrs. Douglas on that. I think it needs to be designated, and I'm usually against taking money that's earmarked for one item and spending it elsewhere. So I think it should be earmarked for rainy day fund only, nothing else.
Additional discussion.
Doug, what's the description on that fund?
Purpose of funding school capital improvements, building maintenance, and repair.
So that's where we were able to use it for your capital improvements because it said capital improvements. But every time we have funded this, and I went back through the meeting minutes. It was to replenish this fund for the purpose of failing air handler units on existing buildings with no other method of paying for it. A boiler, a septic system. It had nothing to do with, we under budgeted for a capital improvement project.
And I mean,
That's what your other fund is for. You have a fund for capital improvements. So use your capital improvement fund for capital improvements and leave this one alone for building maintenance.
any additional discussion? Mr. Hayes, did you have anything, sir?
No, thank you.
All right, roll call
When
vote,
was the fund established?
2005.
2005, yep.
Ms. Hirschberger, did you have something, Mr. Lee?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, would you be willing to
I
at
don't
least publicly state that this money will be used for rainy day fund
I don't think
only?
you can, but you can't. They can't tie future school boards to that because it's,
Why?
because it's in the purpose of the fund includes capital improvements.
You have to
So
change the
if 5,
language.
10 years from now, we find ourselves in a similar
maybe
situation,
look into it.
they could use that. And it's not easy to amend the purpose of a fund, so the
The
reality is,
school board would have to take action on
I think
that
you
to
have
change the
to-
name of the fund itself.
I
That would
don't
be
know how
action.
easy it is, so
School
I
board
might
would
have to
do.
close it and start a new one. I don't know, but
Oh.
I would support one that's building maintenance only.
Yeah, couldn't they just remove school capital improvements
If
from
they-
the description of the article?
That would be a question I think they would have to ask school legal is, can the school board amend the definition of that fund without it having to go to the voters to do that? I don't.
I would assume it would have to go to the voters, because the voters approved it to
Right.
begin with.
All right. Any additional discussion? Roll call vote. Ms. Hirschberger. This is
To approve.
to
the-
recommend Article 3. Yes, as stated. Thank you.
Yes.
Yes. Mr. Leary.
No, not without the changes.
Ms. Douglas.
Not in the current form, no.
I'm a yes. Ms. Stevens.
I agree with Carrie and Bob on this one. I'm gonna say no.
Mr. Taylor.
No.
Mr. Barca.
Yes.
Mr. Bork.
Yes.
And Mr. Hayes.
No.
So this Article 3 is not recommended by the Budget Committee by a vote of 4-5-0.
That's not to say, I want to be clear, it's not to say that I don't think a building maintenance fund is appropriate and necessary, but I want it tied specifically to building maintenance.
Yes, I would re-vote on that if that were changed.
If the wording were
I'd gladly
changed.
support that.
Can I just respond? I mean, I really struggle with the notion of building maintenance. When we had air handlers that were broken and not working, we're fixing them. And it just, to me, the spirit of, and I wasn't around in 2005 when it got approved, but when you read the language and the words in front of us, it was absolutely allowable use. I agree with you, Carrie, on the idea that we shouldn't have had to do it. That's a separate question. But the point is, we had to.
No, I understand what they're saying, but I also went through the meeting minutes in 2018 where we replenished it, and the description and the purpose that for which we refunded it, I was specifically tied to building maintenance. So yes, we could hang our hats on something from 22 years ago, or however 16, 18 years ago. But the reality is when we put funds in it recently, it was for building maintenance.
So I voted to support this because I think we need the money there for these items. However, I don't disagree with Ms. Douglas's spirit of this because when you look at the language that says school and capital improvements, to me that's redundant with Article 4.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the point that you were making, right?
You have Article 4, yep.
And so I guess the question would be, because we can still always revote this, is if that is amended, if that's, what is the process by which that language to be changed? Is it going to have to, I mean, this is obviously a question for your school legal. Are you able to make that change to go in front of the voters in 2 months and have school capital improvements taken out of that so that school capital improvement, because what I'm assuming happened is in 2005, Article 4 didn't exist until 2020, right? So Article 3 was created to catch everything. Article 4 was created for capital improvement. At that time, we probably should have taken the language out of Article 3, but we didn't. It can't do anything about it. I guess, what's the process by which could that
So
be removed.
I think it is correct that it has to go back to the voters. I think it's correct that you have to close this one out, make it go away and reestablish a new one. I believe that is what the attorneys would recommend, but we can ask that question. My question back to you, let's go down the thought experiment for a minute. We take out capital improvement and it says building maintenance and repairs. The work we did there was repairing and maintaining that facility. So wouldn't that still have been allowed by the board? So the fact that, we're choosing to say that HVAC unit is a capital improvement. Is it? There was no ventilation. It had to be repaired. It had to be maintained. So I still think you would have an allowable use for that fund.
Well, see, my next thing would be, I'm not sure I would support the current agents to expend, in which case we could have a different discussion about whether it's an allowable expense. But the being is, I don't think it was right in the way in which it was used, and I'd like to tighten this one up to prevent us from being able to use it in that purpose again.
If it's not an option to do that for March, then I think that's something that needs to be on the table, thinking about 2024.
And we'll take this back to the board, and as the governing body, it's ultimately their decision what the article looks like.
Yep.
I'm sure they're watching tonight. They'll be.
And if there's an opportunity for us to revote after what would I would assume probably be school deliberative, then
Well, there's
we,
budget hearing. They can still submit a different one for budget hearing.
yeah, I mean, that's a tight window, but sure, yeah, it could be the budget hearing or the school deliberative. We could do either or. All right, Article 4. Shall the Litchfield School District vote to raise and appropriate 40% of the fund balance up to a sum of $125,000 to be added to the Capital Improvements Expendable Trust Fund established in 2020 for the purpose of funding the study, planning, and cost of new construction or renovation of existing facilities in the Litchfield School District, with said funds to come from the June 30 unassigned fund balance available for transfer on July 1 of this year, with no additional amount to be raised from taxation. This amount is consistent with the capital plan adopted by the town of Litchfield in September 2020. Estimated tax impact is $0.
So the question we had last time is what?
Can I do a motion first?
Motion to recommend Article 4.
Second.
Second.
Okay, motion second. Go ahead, Ms. Douglas.
The question was, what is a real number? Like I asked, this is the number we've been using. Have we actually? Clearly we know now how expensive architect and engineering and consultant fees are. How accurate is this number for the purpose for which we hope to use it?
This is a stepping block towards the right number, just because this goes with the capital plan, which kind of says put away $125,000 each year. Just like before, you were talking about putting away a certain amount each year towards a new fire truck type of thing, to step you in the right direction. So this would get some work done, but then again, if a new building was built, this would go a slight chunk of that new building, but then you'd have a much bigger warrant.
So is there a goal, a target amount we hope to have, or are we just every year from here on till infinity, we're going to just spend $125,000? Because
Well,
when we do because the town with their funds, they said with a target goal of $75,000, with a target goal of $100,000. What is the target goal for this fund?
What was it before it had to be depleted? Do you know what the balance of it was back in September?
In that fund, it was $750 maybe.
Yeah. 750K.
I think so. You have the
Yeah.
balance.
Yeah, 619 came out, and then 125 came back in, so.
So the balance of
690.
that
But even
currently
prior
is
to that, it was
260.
still in the capital
Huh?
plan
Current balance.
for, what, 5 more years at least?
Current balance is 125,000.
Oh, okay. I
and
thought you
some
said
change.
690.
619 came out, so it would have been around 619 that was in it before.
Oh, okay. Got it. Okay.
But I don't
current-
think that was the total goal amount, because you would have to add in what was in the capital projects.
But we've seen that doing spec plans and all this other stuff, 125 is, like, is that even enough to get the plans necessary for a bond vote? I question whether that's enough. So where is this, like,
Well,
we've been throwing a number at it, but there's no justification as to why this is the number we chose.
So we have a price of what it would take to develop the drawings necessary for the bond vote. And I'll get you that exact amount, but there's 125 in there. If we add this 125, we're at 250. And I'm pretty confident that the work that we've already paid for from the architect, plus that 250, would allow us to get the drawings for the bond vote. But I'll do a double check to make sure of that. But we do have an agreement that talks about the phases of development and what the costs are.
What additional money, if any, would you need in order to submit a formal application for state funding?
So we've already submitted our formal application for state funding.
Okay.
We've already been ranked as the number 5 priority school in the state. That's based upon all of the factors the state weighs. I will tell you that if you compare Griffin Memorial School to the 16 other projects, and the only thing you do is consider the building need and the deficiencies in the facility, we have the number 2 neediest building in the state of New Hampshire, number 2. We dropped from position 2 to position 5 when the property wealth of Litchfield is factored in. We don't have a free and reduced population like Rochester. Rochester received 200 points because of the poverty levels in their community.
Monadnock.
We received 0 points. And so it's because of that that we dropped from 2, which is comparing apples to apples. How bad is the school? How much does it need to be done? We dropped from position 2 to position 5 because of the community that we live in.
When would a decision be made on yes or no on funding and how much?
So we have invited our legislators to attend the facility meeting next Wednesday. What we're advocating for is to increase the amount of money that's available in the building aid pool. We're asking them to engage with us and to think about Litchfield taxpayers and to help support. There are several bills in the House to increase the amount of money that's available. The $50 million that has historically been offered and the law states should be offered, but again, there's no budget yet, right? The $50 million, if that gets distributed to Rochester, Colebrook Academy, Monadnock School System, the Concord School System, and then Litchfield, there would not be any money left for Litchfield. We would get exactly 0. Okay? However, if any one of those communities fails to fund a bond project, so Rochester still has to raise quite a bit of money locally, right, to do their project. And so if they vote no on that, then they don't get their $20 million of earmarked money, and it trickles down in the list. And we could benefit by another community not funding a school. So there's 2 angles on this. It's the timing angle to be at the right spot at the right time. And the other thing is, how much is the pool of money going to be? Those are both big unknowns at this point. We'll know a lot more after the March vote as to where other communities have landed on their projects.
So I was going to say, so we'll know mid-March if any of those other communities voted down their projects, and they would have another year to stay on, right? Because it's a kind of a biennium piece. Okay.
Oh,
But
by
so
then,
would
maybe
we.
bond rates will be down.
The other thing is, if you look at the way the law is written, let's say the top 3 schools do get funded and the whole $50 million goes to them, we don't come off the list as long as we're making good faith efforts toward building the school.
Would a passage of one of these articles be considered a good faith effort and keep us?
Buying the land and having the money in hand would be a huge good faith effort that we could show to the state that, yep, our community's backing this. They bought the land. They want to build a school called the Robin Riley Elementary School. So we would probably be able to stay on the list at that point. If we're putting money aside saying that 125 is earmarked toward the school, so that shows good faith effort by the community, we would then go out of this biennium into the next biennium. We hold our spot. The only way we get trumped is if a school with higher life safety needs comes along. Otherwise, we would trickle from position 5 up to position 1, 2, somewhere in that order. And, so I don't like to say a bond vote in March of 26. Did I do the math right? 23 is the first one, 24. It would be March of 25. We could be in a whole different landscape. So there's a little bit of a just knowledge of the way the system and the allocations go that might make that worthwhile, and money would be available. But I think, advocating for more money is a more acute way to get this addressed, right? If there's more money, then we would qualify. Hopefully it would trickle down to us.
Finishing off the architectural needs with this additional 25, do we then at that point hit a stop of pumping money into potentially a project that could not pass? Or is there then the following year, well, we need more to be able to do this? At what point do we finally put in enough of an investment to be able to say, look, here is what we need, and this is what we go to the voters with, and they decide yes or no, because we've now gone, probably a good 5-6 years now of like, well, pump money for this, pump money for this, pump money for this, pump money for this. We probably have spent, I don't know, 400, 500,000 so far on.
Oh, I don't think we've spent.
Because I mean, it was like 60, 125, 125, 125. At what point do we just finally say, stop pumping the money in and figure out, is it a yes or is it a no?
I would assume
Is this 125 it?
I would assume it would be at the point that you said, kind of based on what we have there, what this would be would get us up to that potential bond vote. I mean, in my mind, what I don't know what else. Let's say there's a bond vote and it fails, but we're still in that biennium, potentially, based on what he just explained. We would have another opportunity for a bond vote. We would still have the land, potentially, if that passes. I don't know what, I guess that's the spirit of the question. Would there have to be any other work in that year, right? There would have to be any money associated with
until the time that we finally come to a bond vote. I mean, basically, I'm trying to get to where Carrie's looking for, which is, what is that, like, goal? If the goal is 250, gets us the architectural plans, we have everything we need, it can go to the voters, and it can go to the state, then at that point, we can just finally say, okay, that's it. And one more 125 here, and then we freeze until it's a yes or a no.
So I think, what is the ceiling of that? It's to have the shovel-ready plans, right? I mean, I've had people in the community say to me, well, you already have plans for a new elementary school at the middle school site. That's not accurate. Those are conceptual diagrams only. They are two-dimensional diagrams. They are not, okay, now build this plans. So what we want to do is get up to the point that we would have, here are the plans for building the school, okay?
Those plans were for a 600 enrollment student.
Correct.
Yeah.
Right,
Correct.
but we had this fund, we had what, 750, 6 months ago? So
15, yeah.
so are we going to have at 125 plus 125, are we even near where, I don't even, if 600 and something wasn't enough, what's 250 really?
250 gets us those architectural plans to be able to bring a bond vote to the voters.
Why didn't we have that if we had 600?
Because we didn't have land to be able to
Hang on,
give to an architect, right?
I didn't get to finish answering the question. So here's the other thing is, it's not about spending all that on plans. If there's money left in there and the school board says, and the taxpayers are clear, now use that toward, you don't have to bond the full amount. You got $600,000 left, put that toward the price of the new school and bond a little bit less. So the money will have already been collected, I guess is my point.
I thought it was kind of a savings account.
I know,
Sorry?
I thought it was kind of like a savings account towards.
Yes.
Yep.
no, I know, it's just,
It-
but we had 600 and now we're like, we're gonna have to rebuild the 600 again, like, so, yeah, it's just.
Any additional discussion on Article 4? All right, roll call vote. This is to recommend Article 4, Capital Improvements Expendable Trust Fund, 40% of the fund balance up to a sum of $125,000. Ms. Hirschberger,
Yes.
Mr. Leary,
No.
Ms. Douglas.
No, I'm tapped out, no.
I am a yes. Ms. Stevens,
Yes.
Mr. Taylor,
Yes.
Mr. Barca,
Yes.
Mr. Bork,
Yes.
and Mr. Hayes.
No.
So that is recommended by the Budget Committee by a vote of 6-3-0. Article 5. Shall the school district establish a capital reserve fund under the provisions of RSA 35-1C called the Employee Benefits Capital Reserve Fund for the purpose of funding the payment of negotiated employee benefits, including but not limited to health insurance reimbursements, changes in coverage or policies chosen by employees, severance benefits, and such other benefits as are from time to time negotiated and become contractual obligations of the district, and further to raise and appropriate 10% of the fund balance up to $100,000 to be placed in this fund, with said funds to come from the June 30 fund balance available for transfer on July 1, and further to name the school board as agents to expend from this fund. Estimated tax impact is $0. Do I have a motion?
Make a motion to recommend Article 5.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Bork, second by Mr. Taylor. Discussion?
I'm annoyed that this is number 5, and I'll tell you why. Because the unexpended fund balance is coming from unspent severance packages. So the very thing that ought to go into this is being used to fund other warrant articles first. So it really annoys me that this isn't the first one that gets funded, and it isn't being funded in full with the severance packages that haven't been used this year. So I'm very irritated with not only the amount that's being asked for, but its location on the ballot.
What with the amount? What amount do you think it should be?
Was it not $65,000 in severance packages at least that were notified last year, included in this year's budget for teachers who then did not retire?
I don't have that amount with me.
Which, by the way, we should send them gift baskets because based on what I'm seeing, I think we have a $63,000 fund balance potentially. So if not for these people who chose not to retire, we'd be in a deficit.
Well, I mean, to your point, 10% of the fund balance and where it is at Article 5,
It's not going to get funded, and the very reason we would have money is because these people didn't retire and should go in this warrant article to begin with. So it should be the first one funded, and it should be funded in full with the unspent severance packages.
But I guess worst case scenario, at least the good thing is that
You get money back.
it's created this year by voters voting for it. It may not get funded, but at least it's created
Fund
so
is
that way it
created.
can be
But as a
leveraged in the
taxpayer, it's
future.
insulting that the very money that should go into this is being used to fund other things first.
I don't want to speak for the board, but my understanding from last night from their reordering was that they listened to the tax people, to the people of Litchfield from the September meetings who said, you're taking from this rainy day fund. We don't, we need that rainy day fund to be at a certain level as well, to make ourselves, everyone in the town to feel comfortable.
and I think that was
So that was, at least that's how I took last night's.
Yeah,
That's a-
I mean, you see the percentages here. Those were the priorities.
I appreciate
Yeah.
that, but I doubt very many of them realize that they will be taxed twice for these same severance packages. So to me, it's just, the frustrating part is the very reason you have a balance to begin with is the very reason why we're creating this to begin with, and it's the last one being funded. So it's just, to me, it's wrong.
Any additional discussion on Article 5? All right, roll call vote. Ms. Hirschberger,
Yes.
Mr. Leary,
Yes.
Ms. Douglas,
I'm voting yes, but I think it's wrong.
I am a yes. Ms. Stevens,
Yes.
Mr. Taylor,
Yes.
Mr. Barca,
Yes.
Mr. Bork,
Yes.
and Mr. Hayes. Sorry, could you say that again, sir?
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carries 900, recommended by the Budget Committee. All right, that
Isn't here.
concludes our school and town warrant article voting for tonight. I want to thank the town for earlier and thank the school for coming tonight, answering questions, explaining these warrant articles. As we stated, I think kind of throughout both of those, there can be opportunities to revisit these either after next week's budget hearing or after either the town or school deliberative sessions. With that, I'm going to move to our agenda for member input, new business. Any member input, new business this evening?
I'm just still looking for a total cost of the LMS project. FY '23, FY '24, FY '29. When is this finally going to cost us? We have our arms around the consultant's fees, the extension of the construction schedule, increase in escalation costs. How much are we paying?
So we have a schedule for the remainder of this year, which was one of the things that was linked in my presentation last night, which, I'm trying to come up with a name of it.
I know. I did send it over. There were a few
Is
documents
that the
linked,
financial?
though.
No.
Yeah, you did.
I find it amusing though that you're not sure which link to pick, so. I hate that, just send me a PDF.
I got it. It's
So-
the capital projects fund.
Right, but that's FY '23.
Yeah, and then there's one for '24.
Okay,
As well, which shows the North Branch, as well as Windy Hill, which are the architects, and, they have had an increase in their amount because they've been there longer.
yeah.
As well as Resilient, which is a commissioning agent that has not increased, they're just spacing out their work. So those are known costs going into it. As far as a total thing, I don't, was that part of the,
I'm looking here.
for the outside consultant to come in? Were they looking for a total at all?
Yeah.
I don't know that
the
we've,
auditor, yeah.
I don't know that we've actually summed it all up though, so we can do that
Right.
and get.
So we talked about
Because
doing
the
that
num-
once the budget season was done.
I also said I was gonna put on every week's budget, every week's agenda, so I'm still asking.
I'm sending an email as we speak to Mr. Taunton and Dr. Jetty, just as a reminder for this.
You guys,
We're one step closer, though. This is, you know, I mean, he's actually gone through and looked at what the anticipated costs are through the end of the year. So I think, you know.
so,
it's just a
and
matter
am
of
I
when to
reading it correct
spend.
in that the fund balance is about 63,000 is what we think? Is that what that number is?
No, that's showing that with known cost
Mm-hmm.
increases, some known savings, and these aren't all the known
Right.
cost increases or all the known savings, that we can cover. Now, we're still, each school is still pretty tight on their budget, so we expect that there might be more savings as well, because everyone understands this is just, it's a different year. And we need to get through this year as best as we can. So those are looking at some of the knowns where we're at. So hopefully people say, okay, this hasn't been the greatest year, but we have an exit plan as of now. You know, should it be more than that? Yeah. Will it be a lot more than that? I don't know at this point.
So FY '24 budget, I'm seeing funds needed 407,000. Is that the shortfall then? For that, but that's,
The revenue's above it there.
right, well, the revenue is
408, 11,
408, then there's expensive 815, so that means we're
Yep.
short 407. Should we be looking to add 407? Or are we gonna try, that's the budget we're reviewing right now, right?
That's it, that is in the operating budget. That's one of the reasons why the operating budget is vastly different than the default budget. That 407 is worked into the operating budget on Article 1, but not worked into the default budget.
Alright, I'll have to try to digest that a little bit, I'm not quite sure why it would be that way, so. Yeah, I have to digest that to see if I fully understand what.
So the operating budget went up by 815,316
Okay.
due to the expected cost, and then it decreased by $408,011, and that's why one of the reasons why there's a difference between the default and the operating budget is that 407,000. The other reason is, well, the default budget never really, it's not meant to necessarily follow the fiscal year '24 budget. It comes off the fiscal year '23 budget and ends up where it ends up, type of thing. And there's a difference between the default budget and, as of right now, the current operating budget, minus the capital projects fund. And the default budget doesn't have the capital projects fund in it because, the reason we talked about earlier, with
Right.
who approved the contract.
Because the contract wasn't approved
Yep.
by voters.
But I thank you for pointing out that, you know, and we did use very conservative projections, because, you know, a lot of this is projecting out over the next 6 months or so. But it does show that we will finish the year with a positive fund balance. We think it will grow beyond the amount. And so, you know, it's taken a lot of work and a lot of projection to get there, and a lot of work on our team part in terms of decisions that we've made and recommendations we've made to the board.
Any additional member input, new business this evening?
Once I hope there's a debrief on the town level to say, as we review how this LMS project went, and said, you know, this is how we approached it, this is what we asked for, this is what we spent, this is why we were wrong, and this is how we plan to not do that the next big project we ask. I think we really need to understand that, how much extra did we spend? Like, how much extra did this cost? And I think the taxpayers deserve that answer.
Is that part of what's coming out of your external audit review that the RFP went out for?
Well, if you
No,
look at what
that's
the
really
audit
looking
asked for,
back.
that's really not
No.
in the scope of what they're gonna look at.
Yeah,
They're following the money.
I mean, finding that total, now that you have this, it's just a matter of adding in fiscal year 23. So this is, I don't think that's a big ask at this point in time, do you?
No, and I appreciate you're doing the audit. I just, in reflecting on it, I'm not sure that I actually support that anymore. I think we know what happened. I think we didn't capture all our costs, quite frankly. I think we put forward a project number without capturing all of the expenses.
Okay.
Audit's just gonna tell us that, like, well, we just missed all these.
Carrie, that's.
And then a mistaken assumption.
Yeah,
Right,
so-
so I think we were actually capturing, I think you're right, but they were being captured, but the assumption was they could be carried. And it's that mistaken assumption, so I don't think all of them were
How is
captured.
an audit gonna, like, I just don't understand why we would pay for an audit to tell us something we
I
already
think
know.
People have asked for an independent third
Yeah,
party
I agree.
to look over the shoulder of the board, to look over my shoulder, to look over, well,
Yeah.
not Doug's per
That
se.
was, I mean,
And I
Mr.
think
Leary
that's a fair
referred,
ask.
Mr. Leary referred to it, that was something I heard at that meeting, was
No.
independent auditors from the town, and I think,
I appreciate, because I probably asked for an audit too, but then looking at where I feel we went wrong, I'm not sure that an audit's gonna tell me anything I don't already know. We started with the wrong assumptions.
But if we have an independent third party who confirms that what we have explained was accurate, I think that's actually helpful.
Okay.
all right. I'm gonna open it for public input. No, go ahead, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I actually had a question, or a statement, I guess. If I understand correctly, the selectmen never had a discussion as far as the capital improvement committee's recommendations of how to spend the ARPA funds, is that correct? I know the list was sent from the capital improvement committee
There was
to
a
the selectmen.
presentation, wasn't there?
On spending the ARPA
I
funds?
thought that the capital improvement plan, they presented to the planning
They,
board.
they presented us their plan, yes.
Right, but there was never discussion as far as
Spending the ARPA money, no.
which, you know, the committee spent several hours, I assume, right, going over those and recommendations to the selectmen, and yet they took the selections and just did what they want to do.
To be fair, I think the CIP committee knew that was, at least I knew going into the CIP committee that it was a recommendation, they're not obligated.
But I would have expected some conversation as far as.
And I wonder if the outcome would have looked different, hypothetical, had the fire truck opportunity not presented itself. Could have better aligned to what.
Well,
they-
fire truck was their number one.
And did you guys
Thing for the town
allocate
anyways.
it all anyway? Is
What?
all of the ARPA funding
Yes.
out? Oh, it is
Yeah.
all.
Yep.
Alright.
Yep.
But if we're gonna only hold the Board of Selectmen as the CIP is just a recommendation, they could do what they want, then we need to extend that same, courtesy to the school board.
I haven't been able to get them to do anything I want anyway, so my
No, I'm saying
expectation.
that was a big critique before, was that with the LMS project being pulled forward, it was not following the CIP. That's all.
Correct.
I don't agree.
That is-
I'm pretty
that's
sure I
true.
sat at the CIP saying I wasn't gonna vote on the schools in thing, because I didn't agree with their thing anyway. So,
I'm
sure.
just saying, if you're gonna say it for the Board of Selectmen, then we should say it for the school board. That's all.
All right. Any final member input, new business?
The school board has a right to.
Do you have any questions for us, or more questions, or are we?
I think I'm gonna send you an email here as soon as we adjourn on Ms. Douglas's questions around the LMS project costs. So that is my lingering question that I have from tonight
Yeah,
at 11
so
p.m.
We talked about that with the school board about a month ago, and the agreement was after budget season, once things slow down, that could be a next big project that I could work on.
All right. Open public input. I'm going to close public input, and before I entertain a motion, I just remind everybody, next Thursday, January 12th, CHS Auditorium, 7 p.m. will be the budget hearing. It's an opportunity for you to come and hear essentially everything that we went through tonight, hear all of the warrant articles. You'll hear from the school will be there to help explain, the town will be there to help explain. You'll have an opportunity to ask any questions. So we encourage you to come out and be a participant in that. With that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So made.
Moved by Ms. Douglas, second. By Ms. Stevens, quick roll call vote. Ms. Hirschberger,
Yes.
Mr. Leary.
Yep.
Ms. Douglas.
Yes.
I'm a yes. Ms. Stevens.
Yes.
Mr. Taylor.
Yes.
Mr. Barca. Mr. Bort.
Yes.
Mr. Hayes.
Yes.
Motion carries 9-0-0, and we are adjourned. Thank you, everybody. Have a great night.
I don't understand the.